One morning, he woke up as the Demon Lord, the final boss of his favorite game. World conquest? Too risky. The hero's already max level. But do nothing? His starving demon army will eat him instead. So the mighty ruler of darkness made his greatest command: plant the fields. We're growing potatoes. From war to wheat, from conquest to cultivation, this demon lord might just save the world. One harvest at a time. Can a potato save the apocalypse? Let's find out. The story begins with Kim Jang-chol, who used to be an ordinary Korean student. Yesterday, unexpectedly for himself, he suddenly became the Demon King of Kratos. This is the final boss villain in the protagonist's favorite game. Well, who hasn't experienced this? Of course, the goal of Blood Paladin is to awaken an ancient hero from a magical slumber. Who cares anyway? Even if the protagonist tells this, it won't help. He has other problems now. Advisor level 15, Zephyros addressed the Lord. He announced that preparations for war were complete. At the same time, many monsters on the battlefield screamed. The Bloodsucker Prince, level 534, Asura, grinning madly, shouted that they would not live without food and would conquer them. The Cold Monarch, level 531, Sergei, sternly added that an evil fate had settled their people in a scorched desert. They were forced to eat their own kind. They would build an empire for centuries. The Archduke of Mist, level 555, Hartok, ordered monsters to kill humans and crush the skulls of elves. The Black Tyrant, level 539, Bale Stone, roared that all humans would become food for demons. The MC, standing on a pedestal, looked at the demons who had raised their weapons. Kratos furiously ordered the demons to listen to him. The demons instantly fell silent. The protagonists prevent this war at all costs. The MC declared that from now on he commands, and the demons froze in anticipation. Kratos exclaimed that from now on they will not fight, but will cultivate the land. The demons looked at the Lord in bewilderment and roared, "What is this?" The protagonist, looking horrified, opened his mouth and thought that demons were very scary. The demons, frightened, immediately fell silent. At the same time, the system window notified that he had started his 20th playthrough. The player character, level 9990, aged Kimchi, opened his eyes with a terrifying look. MC thought that if a war started, this would definitely kill him. Jang-chol graduated from an agricultural institute in Korea, hoping to become a rich agricultural businessman in the future. The protagonist was a genius, and it soon became clear that he would graduate with excellent marks. And of course, everyone needs a top student. The professor, smiling, said that MC was doing well. Maybe Jang-chol could write his dissertation for him? The professor would be indebted. The man, smiling ominously, clarified that he really needed the protagonist's help with the project, because MC was the best. The physical education teacher, smiling, ordered the protagonist to exercise. Jang-chol became a person who was constantly forced to work, and eventually, he burned out. The tired protagonist wondered, what kind of life is this? Why does he do all this, if the professors take all the credit? He raised his hand with great rage and shouted that these freaks must be killed. Jang-chol was constantly stressed. He needed dopamine to escape, and he only got it from games. It is very difficult to progress in this game. The difficulty level is too high. No one has ever completed it more than 18 times. The protagonist so desperately needed a feeling of success and achievement that he sat down and played for several days without sleep. He quickly completed the game 10 times. Thus, Jang-chol became the first player to complete the game 19 times. The protagonist smiled madly and noted that he was very happy. He is the coolest in the world. The 20th playthrough will be on the hellish difficulty level. MC must level up well. He laughed and added that he is the coolest. His character level reached 9990. Jang-chol clarified that the maximum level in the game is 99999. So that will be enough. How many years did it take him to level up? The game window asks if he wants to start the 20th playthrough. The protagonist agreed and quickly pressed the joystick button. Bright beams of light from the TV quickly spread across the room. Jang-chol gritted his teeth in surprise and screamed, "What is that?" His soul flew out of his body at incredible speed and flew into the TV. A bright flash appeared in the sky. The protagonist calmly flew down. He tensed and wondered what that was. MC mentally told himself to calm down and remember that he was smart. Jang-chol thought he was blue, which meant he was a soul. The protagonist probably wouldn't break when he fell, most likely. MC, flying rapidly over the mountains, thought he saw the Tower of Life. He was in the Blood Paladin game. Jang-chol looked at the building with great surprise and thought it was the Paladin's mycelium. MC furiously flew down and screamed that he was about to possess his own character, aged Kimchi, and his character was pumped up almost to the maximum level. This is the beginning of a new life in an infinitely powerful body. Jang-chol approached his own character, aged Kimchi. He calmed down and thought that he was looking at the character, and for some reason, he did not want to possess him. Suddenly, the protagonist's soul quickly turned and flew upward. MC screamed, "Where is he going? What is this? Genchul approached the Demon King and thought anything but Kratos. The protagonist said he didn't want to. Currently, the protagonist, tired, sitting on the throne, noted that he was simply going crazy. MC put his hand to his forehead and thought that if not for this stupid thought at the sight of aged kimchi, he would have successfully possessed the body of the most powerful being in this universe. The protagonist is just a fool. At the same time, Zephyros calmly walked up the stairs. He noticed the scream, and the demon exclaimed that Kratos was losing his strength. The Lord became frightened and stopped his advance. Asura, sitting furiously at the table, proposed to his comrades that they unite against the Lord and kill Kratos, and they would divide the power between each other. Kratos had become king. He had cut off the previous king's head. Hartok asked with interest, what if the Lord hadn't become weaker? To defeat the Lord, at least 2 of the 4 of them would have to die in battle. Sergei calmly noted that if Asurat agreed to be their living shield, then she would agree. Asurat barked angrily. Does she already want to die, or what? He sternly asked. What if they find evidence that their king has become weak? What will they do then? The demons grinned terrifyingly and replied that they would come and kill Kratos. Baal thought he really wanted to eat now. Zephyros tensed up after hearing their conversation. After a while, the advisor reported that the soldiers' morale was very low. Cases of cannibalism and desertion had become more frequent. The 4 generals were furious. They openly stated that Kratos had weakened and were planning to defeat the king and cut off his head. MC tensed up and thought that if the 4 of them attacked him, he would not survive. At his post, showing weakness was mortally dangerous. So, what about his aged kimchi? If the character has no soul, maybe he remained a helpless body without a soul? Wouldn't it be easier to just go to war against the people? Zephyros, holding a magic ball in his hands, added that General Ugmia had also sent a video from the tomb. Aged kimchi horrifiedly raised his weapon and Ugmia begged for mercy. The character extended his hands towards the camera and the general shouted, "What is he doing?" The general asked him to stop. Loud screams came from the video. Aged kimchi looked at the camera with a terrifying expression and a bloody face. Kratos put his hand to his face in fear and thought that this would not work because aged kimchi was insane. The protagonist does not want the character to break into his castle. He must stay here, no matter what. If MC seems weak to the demons, the 4 generals will kill him, and if he goes to war with the human world, aged kimchi will kill him. Kratos began to cry and wondered why he ended up in this game world. What happiness could there be here? If he were to survive here, there was only one thing left to do: solve the food problem and calm the demons. Zephyros asked where the Lord was going. The protagonist apologized and replied that he wanted to look for land for cultivation. Zephyros looked at him suspiciously. MC asked tensely, "What's wrong?" Zephyros adjusted his glasses with his hand and noted that Kratos was usually proud, arrogant, and rude. And now, the Lord was asking for forgiveness. Kratos frightened him, as such behavior was unacceptable. The advisor asked the Lord not to do it again. Kratos wondered what was wrong with the advisor. Was Zephyros provoking him? He hadn't noticed this character acting like this before. Zephyros only appeared once before the battle with the Demon King, but he was a very popular character among the game's fans. Zephyros said that the Demon Lord didn't want to fight the Paladin. He ordered the Paladin to leave. Aged Kimchi struck the advisor with terrifying force. Zephyros disappeared, asking for the Lord's forgiveness and clarifying that he was too weak to protect Kratos. Players considered Zephyros very loyal to the Demon King. The advisor arrogantly said that the king had made such a mistake that it couldn't be worse. He couldn't remember a demon lord who would disgrace himself so much in front of his own people. MC gritted his teeth in irritation and thought, Zephyros is a big problem. The advisor picked up his notebook and asked, "So, the king is planning to cultivate the land?" Kratos had previously been as memory dead as a pigeon. Kratos angrily barked that he was, in fact, a demon lord and ordered the advisor to back off. Zephyros disagreed and asked him to listen. The protagonist wondered why the advisor wasn't afraid of him. After a while, Zephyros clarified that both Kratos and his predecessors had already attempted to cultivate their desert lands. The climate in their region is arid. The Lord knows that nothing will grow here. The protagonist replied that he knows these lands are called dead. With his abilities, the Lord can make this land yield crops. MC thought that he actually hated farming, but he really needed to survive. Kratos knelt down and scraped his nails across the ground. He threw soil into his mouth with a horrified expression. Zephyros picked up the notebook and noticed the Lord was acting very strangely. The protagonist was eating dirt like a beggar. Kratos barked angrily, "What is the advisor writing there?" He ordered Zephyros to stop immediately. He replied that it was his duty. He was, after all, the Demon Lord's chronicler. Zephyros notes that the Lord's memory has definitely deteriorated. The protagonist spat the dirt out of his mouth and thought that it was dry and devoid of nutrients, and especially nitrogen. Nitrogen is a chemical element vital for plants. Although nitrogen makes up 78% of the Earth's atmosphere, plants are unable to absorb it from the air. The triple covalent bond of atoms prevents any chemical reactions of nitrogen. Man has invented a way to saturate the soil with nitrogen using fertilizers, and this has increased crop yields throughout the world. Can fertilizers be used here? It's useless, because this land is unsuitable. so we need to try a natural way to saturate the soil with nitrogen. Lightning, under the influence of high voltage, turns the nitrogen in the air into nitrite nitrogen. As raindrops fall, they absorb it, and this is how nitrite nitrogen gets into the soil. And the Demon Lord's strongest ability is Blood Lightning Strike. It's an explosion of drops of blood using lightning. Very good for his idea of making this land fertile. The protagonist ominously ordered the advisor to step back. MC prepared to use his ability and sank his claws into his own hand. Blood gushed out, and Kratos, wincing in pain, wondered if this insane demon really did this all the time. The protagonist turned his head in confusion. The demons looked at the protagonist with condemnation from behind a tree. MC ominously opened his mouth and looked at them. Zephyros adjusted his glasses and noted that my lord had become 100% weaker. Kratos thought that the advisor was definitely some kind of provocateur who wanted to kill him. This is better than dying at the hands of demons. The protagonist quickly slashed his hand with his claws and used Bloody Lightning Strike. Blood gushed out, and the advisor looked at the king. The protagonist cried in pain, and his hand groaned. Hartok arrogantly turned to the Lord and asked if Kratos was feeling unwell. The protagonist looked at the demons in fear and thought they were freaks. At the same time, aged Kimchi looked at the buildings. He thought he remembered little about his past life. He had more than 10 past lives, and he was drawn to that country. Something like a sense of duty drove him there, but it disappeared. It no longer spoke to him. What was the meaning of his existence now? Aged Kimchi became a level 990 NPC. He looked sadly at his own hand. The demons looked at the king with a sly smile. Asura asked ominously, "The protagonist knows their laws, right? Only the strongest can become a demon lord." The protagonist clenched his teeth in rage and thought that the demons were very scary. He can't even use his own ability. Is this really the end? Asura froze in fear and thought that the king was still formidable. The battle hadn't even begun, but Kratos had already strained all his strength so much that even his body was trembling. Asura grinned and asked if the king could defeat them all at once. He turned his head to the side, noticing his comrades hiding behind a tree. Asurat tensed, wondering if they were crazy. Asurat could fight, and they would watch. Maybe the demons would join in if they saw Asurat's chances were good. He breathed heavily and thought that demons were freaks. His comrades mentally noted that they were demons, after all. What did Asurat expect from them? Zephyros raised his hand and said that according to ancient demon tradition, all duels were to the death, with no option to surrender. Asurat asked the advisor to wait, and MC shouted that Zephyros was smart. Asurat sternly raised his weapon and thought that there was no need to fear. He would defeat the king after all. Kratos was weakened. Kratos clenched his teeth in anger and wondered what to do. He only had time to test his strength a little, because a demon lord must be powerful. Yes, the protagonist is strong, but not that strong. Asurat rushed into battle and commanded the king to die. The protagonist mentally screamed in horror. He thought he remembered that blow. It was either a thrust or a backhand. MC would never dodge it. Asurat struck, but Kratos managed to dodge it. The protagonist was very surprised and wondered, how could this be? MC noticed the opponent's movements and thought that his left leg went forward, which means Asurat will definitely strike with a thrust. The opponent's movements are exactly like they were in the game. The protagonist instantly dodged, and Asurat slid to the side. Hartok clarified, did the comrades see the king's face when Kratos dodged? The king seemed to want to cut off Asurat's hand. Sergei tensely asked why the king didn't do that. They would watch some more. Asurat delivered a powerful blow, but the protagonist instantly dodged. MC looked down ominously, wondering what was going on. How could all the enemy's moves be just like in the game? At his first encounter with Asurat, Kratos was simply shocked. The enemy is agile, constantly feinting, and has a wide range of different attacks. But after losing once, 3 times, then 10, on the 128th try, MC finally defeated Asurat. In subsequent playthroughs, the protagonist defeated Asurat by running around the enemy and striking. In short, Kratos exhausted Asurat by dodging his attacks, and the enemy didn't even touch him. The protagonist smiled terrifyingly, and the demons froze in fear. Asurat struck repeatedly, but MC dodged them. Hartok thought the king was mocking Asurat, mocking his weakness. Asurat gritted his teeth in rage, thinking the king was a freak. Kratos dodged the attack with a smile and thought it was a great relief. However, this doesn't mean he can defeat the enemy, but he had just had the thought that in this world, everything is exactly the same as in the game. The system window notifies Kratos that he has realized the main rule of this world. The protagonist looked at the system window in bewilderment and wondered, what is this? Is this a notification like the ones they draw in manhwas? The system window notifies that MC is also successfully dodging the enemy's attacks, maintaining concentration. As a reward, the protagonist receives some of the main character's functionality. Kratos opened the targeting function. The protagonist looked at the enemy and thought it was the same crosshair that appears when using abilities. MC quickly pierced his hand with his nails, and blood gushed out. He swung his hand and used blood lightning. A bright flash of flame engulfed Asurat's body, and he screamed in pain. The demons looked at this in amazement. Meanwhile, the demons, watching the action with enthusiasm, rejoiced. The protagonist looked ominously at the kneeling enemy. Asurat tried to raise his hand and coughed. MC thought angrily. In the game, blood lightning kills with 1 blow, and this fool is alive. Asurat has enormous regeneration. The enemy will recover soon. Kratos struck instantly, and the enemy screamed in horror. The protagonist struck a few more blows, and Sergei, shaking, thought that the king was striking Asura, but only enough to make him suffer more and not die. MC, tired, thought that the enemy would not die. What should he do? The system window notified that the protagonist had burned all of Asurat's clothes, and the enemy was naked. Kratos wondered, why should he know this? Does the system think he's crazy? The system window notified that a new ability had been unlocked. MC can take equipment from someone else's inventory. The protagonist wondered if the enemy had good equipment. Kratos didn't see anything in his inventory, but first, it's better to figure out how to deal with Asurat. The protagonist isn't strong enough to kill the enemy. Asurat has high regeneration, so the enemy will fully recover its health very quickly. MC realized something and looked at the enemy. He thought that Asurat hadn't died yet, so he could still lock onto it and continue hitting the enemy with blood lightning. MC can saturate the soil with tons of nitrogen. Yes, the protagonist is the smartest. He noticed the demons and thought they were scared of him, so he needs to try. Kratos calmly called out to Sergei, and she turned her attention to him frightened. MC ordered her to tie Asurat up, and tightly. She was terrified and wondered if the king really wanted her to tie Asurat up naked. This is to humiliate them both. The protagonist took the first step, the lightning rod. Asurat furiously opened his eyes and exclaimed that the immortal Asurat had fully recovered. The king had truly weakened. Kratos couldn't even kill him with blood lightning. Now he will definitely cut off the king's head. The protagonist took the second step, a strike of bloody lightning. MC thought that the lightning would saturate the soil with nitrogen from the air. Kratos ordered Hartok to cover everything around with fog, so thick that it dripped. Hartok grinned ominously and wondered if the king needed moisture to make the lightning strikes many times more painful. This was something new, a very creative way of torture. He closed his eyes and spread clouds of fog to the sides. Third step, fog. Fourth step, strike and another strike. The protagonist swung his hand horribly, struck and thought that it hurt. Blood gushed towards Zephyros. The demons looked at their comrade in amazement, and Ashurat opened his eyes in pain. MC smiled ominously and thought that this was good. He would make this soil so fertile. What if Kratos really does reap a bountiful harvest? He raised his hand and struck Asurat with bloody lightning. Sand pours down from the protagonist's hand. He, sitting on the ground, thought that this was good. He needs to continue saturating the soil with nitrogen. The next step is improving the soil. Dense soil with a monovalent structure absorbs water poorly and does not allow air to pass through. Loose, nutrient-rich soil is good for agriculture. Therefore, the protagonist must create manure. MC, with a terrifying look, ordered to give him shit. Demons with blood on their bodies looked at him in amazement. They wondered. The king not only mocked and tortured Asurat, but now he wants to smear him with shit. What amazing cruelty. Sometime later in the forest, Aged Kimchi walked along the path. He noticed screams. Aged Kimchi looked at the bushes. Diol Frontera exclaimed in fear that they were attacked by goblins and asked for help. Rayvaj Asrahan clarified that they would generously reward him. Aged Kimchi looked at them ominously, pushing aside a bush with his hand. The comrades were very frightened when they looked at him. Aged Kimchi asked them not to be afraid because he was not strange. The comrades thought that Aged Kimchi was very strange, just terribly strange. Aged Kimchi asked if they were injured, and he quickly threw Rayvaj over his shoulder. Aged Kimchi ordered him to be led, and Dial agreed. Rayvaj noted that Aged Kimchi had great strength. He introduced himself and said that this was his servant, Dial. And who is he? Aged Kimchi looked at the village and replied that he must find out for himself. Sometime later in the castle, the demons were sitting tensely at the table. Hartok asked, where are they going to get the shit? Are they supposed to just shit it out and bring it back? Sergei tensely brought her finger to her teeth and exclaimed that he was crazy. This is just awful. Baal noted that he had not eaten for a long time. He can't go to the toilet, and neither can Sergei. She angrily called him a fool and exclaimed that it was none of his business. Hartok sternly clarified that even if he could, he wouldn't give it to the king. Hartok suggested beating the lesser demons and forcing them to produce what the king wanted. Sometime later, in the demon village, the demon asked not to do this. He shook in fear and exclaimed that he couldn't do it while they were watching. The demon asked them to at least go out. The knight clarified that others also said the same and ended up not going to the toilet. Hartok ominously inquired why it was taking so long. He approached the demon and clarified, so the demon couldn't give them what they demanded? The demon apologized and replied that he hadn't eaten for a long time. He would try to give out the last thing he had left. Hartok immediately squeezed the demon's neck with his hand. He terrifyingly enveloped the space with mana and thanked the demon for the idea. A hand of mana flew to the side at great speed, and the demon screamed in fear. Baal immediately stopped the hand of mana. Hartok turned his head to the side in irritation and asked, what is this? Baal said that if Hartok pierced his stomach, the demon would definitely die, and they wouldn't get any manure. The demon must produce it itself. Let the demon sit on the toilet so they can collect more. Hartok threw the demon aside and remarked that this was clever, despite the fact that Baal said it. Hartok menacingly asked, maybe they should feed the demons Baal's meat so they would get what they wanted. Baal looked ominously at Hartok. The demon trembled in fear, looking at the streams of mana. Hartok and Baal resolutely prepared for battle. The protagonist furiously used blood lightning and screamed, what have they done here? Not only demons can poop. After a while, MC, sitting on the throne, said that he doesn't need the shit of the starving because it's worthless. He needs manure. They understand that, right? Zephyros looked at the king in surprise, and MC clarified that manure is soil fertilizer. He thought that they usually use compost consisting of sawdust, weeds, soil, eggshells, and chicken droppings as fertilizer. Sawdust is no problem. Abandoned houses can be cut down. Weeds can be collected, but where to get eggshells and chicken droppings? The protagonist was stunned, realizing something. He ordered the advisor to give him a map of his lands. Zephyros agreed with his majesty. MC quickly glanced at the map. He thought that, of course, this is the same map he saw in the game, which means he needs to get to this place, and there the protagonist will find what he is looking for. This is the habitat of the demonic seagulls. In the game, they are found everywhere, even in human lands. This means they forage there and consume a lot of nutrients. In the land of demons, they nest, go to the toilet, and lay eggs. That's exactly where they need to be. Zephyros asked if the king wanted to collect the demonic seagull's droppings. The protagonist noticed that the advisor was quick-witted. Zephyros clarified that this place was called the Killer Cliffs for a reason. There was nothing to grab onto. They were slippery and smooth, and if you fell, the sea waves would smash the demon against these same cliffs. Kratos lowered his head and replied that he knew this. He thought this place was difficult for players to access. The protagonist sternly added that he could climb them. After some time on the island, Sergei looked at the king and wondered what he was even thinking about. MC thought that since ancient times there had been brave players who wanted to hunt seagulls, but they all fell and smashed against the rocks. Kratos turned his head to the side and said that he would climb up, fill a bag with droppings and eggshells, and throw it to his comrades. Let them just try not to catch it. He would twist their heads off. The protagonist smiled terrifyingly and added that if his plan worked, everyone would be full and happy. Baal looked at the king and remembered the starving demons. MC wondered tensely what kind of playthrough this had been. Maybe the 13th? He had tried everything to get to the top. Hundreds of attempts, hundreds of deaths. Kratos quickly jumped off the ground, and the demons looked at him expectantly. The protagonist thought that he had finally succeeded. He dug his claws into the rock and thought that because he had found a way in the game, the protagonist's hands slid off the cliff. MC ordered them to open the inventory and take everything off. All the clothes on Kratos' body disappeared, and the demons looked at him in amazement. The protagonist was stuck in a rock texture. He thought he needed to turn around. Sergei, embarrassed, closed her eyes and screamed. MC ordered, "Get dressed." Clothing appeared on his body. Sergei opened her eyes and looked at the king. Kratos ordered, "Turn around and take off clothes." He turned around naked and froze in the rock texture. Sergei looked at the king, who was rapidly turning and climbing the rock. He looked down sternly and thought, "That's it. This is a world with a system. Characters have an inventory, and there's a point on the map that's supposedly inaccessible." Kratos experimented and realized it was entirely achievable. Baal clarified that his majesty had said he wanted to feed them. He would go after the king and help. Zephyros became frightened and noticed that these were rocks. Baal rushed forward, and the advisor, without finishing his sentence, shouted that the Lord couldn't. The protagonist turned his head tensely to the side. Baal quickly leaped toward the cliff and exclaimed that he would follow his majesty. MC barked furiously. "What is Baal doing?" A piece of the cliff broke off, and Baal fell, falling. Kratos instantly grabbed his comrade's hand. He squeezed Baal's hand with great tension, standing in the texture of the cliff. The protagonist thought that his comrade was very heavy. Baal would tear his arm off. However, what was he even doing? Why was MC trying to save his comrade? Baal was one of the generals who were eager to kill him. Wouldn't it be better to just let Baal die? Kratos exclaimed, so that Baal would understand that he had no reason to save him. The protagonist glared sternly at his comrade and sank into memories. The student asked MC to help him only once. He began to cry and said that the professor was not letting him submit his report. The professor kept demanding new work from him, which he took credit for. The guy asked to speak with the professors about him. Let the professor at least accept the report and grade it. Professors really like the protagonist. MC is the best. The professor will listen to Kratos. He was a first-year student who kept up with the protagonist. MC was the first among the slaves, so the professor would have listened to him. But Kratos was afraid to undermine his status and anger the professor for the sake of a student. Maybe if the protagonist had helped him, if he hadn't been indifferent, if he had risked what he had, if he had tried his best, then the disciple would have remained in his memory with a happy smile on his face. Kratos came out of his memories. He screamed with great effort. The protagonist tensed his hand with great force and pulled Baal up. He threw his comrade onto the cliff. Baal landed hard on the ground. MC clenched his hand and let out a sound of pain. Baal noted that his majesty saved him even at the cost of a broken arm. The king shouldn't have. So why? Kratos sternly replied that this pain was in no way comparable to the pain of betrayal and the pain of regret. Baal, looking at the king with admiration, began to cry. MC thought that this is exactly what he should have done to the disciple. He mentally asked the disciple for forgiveness. The system window informs that Kratos hasn't yet adapted to the demon king, but he had done anything possible. As a result, MC received the sincere gratitude of General Baal. Kratos wondered if his comrade was truly grateful. The system window informs that, in honor of the protagonist's achievement, the system gives him the opportunity to receive large bonuses in points. When MC makes his own subjects happy, the happy points system has been opened. The protagonist is surprised and thought, I've heard of this. MC will be able to buy ice cream with them? Is there even ice cream in this world? The system window informs him that ice cream is sold in a fantasy universe. Kratos thought he was even scared, so he can talk to this system. The system window informs him that each of the protagonist soldiers who is fed to his fill will give MC 1 happy point. With these points, Kratos will be able to improve his character's statistics. The protagonist only uses 20% of the Demon Lord Kratos' power. Stamina, intelligence, strength, agility, and magic power, 20%, can be increased by 10%. MC needs to improve his stats to reach 100% of Kratos' power. Kratos decided to add 10% to stamina. The system window notifies that the protagonist needs 50 happy points to increase stamina by 10%. MC snorted in irritation and wondered why it was so expensive. The system window notifies that happy points can also be used to upgrade skills. The protagonist's skill is level 1 Blood Lightning Strike. The happy point requirement to reach the next level is 250. The protagonist thought he had a lot of work to do before then, but if he develops agriculture and harvests crops, then MC will get a lot of happy points, right? Kratos will become stronger, and then he will be able to survive. And gratitude is quite nice. The protagonist smiled terrifyingly. Baal thought tensely that now he owed the king his life, and Kratos would kill him if he disobeyed him. Kratos was simply evil incarnate. The king didn't save him because he wanted the best for him. The protagonist picked up the shell and called out to the demons. MC exclaimed that he would put all the shit in this shell and throw it to them. They must catch it. The demons tensed up and wondered what this meant. Kratos threw the shell down with great force. Liquid from the shell doused the demons, and Zephyros thought he couldn't take it anymore. Kratos resolutely raised his fist and thought that they would do anything for agriculture. The first stage of fertilizer production. Seagull droppings, eggshells, and ash. Everything needs to be ground and mixed well. The protagonist turned to Sergei and said that it needed to be ground and mixed. Sergei was surprised and clarified. MC wanted her to do it? Kratos asked. She has many hands, right? So she should get down to business. Sergei shouted furiously that she was a cold monarch. Her hands were not for kneading shit. She terrifyingly raised many weapons. The protagonist said intimidatingly that then he would give her an easier task. He pointed his finger at Asura and asked, "Does she want to hang there? She won't have to do anything." Sergei instantly dealt numerous blows to the ground. MC put his hand to his chest and thought she scared him. You can't relax with these demons. They are extremely hot-tempered. But Kratos is their lord, and he will make them do what he needs. The second stage is adding water. The protagonist ordered Hartok to create fog, as much humidity as possible. Hartok raised his hands and shouted that this would make the smell even more unbearable. Why do this at all? MC pointed ominously at Asura. Hartok instantly sent clouds of fog in all directions. Kratos asked if the mass had become moistened. Baal squeezed the soil in his hand and agreed. He noted that, as the protagonist had said, it had become soft after adding moisture. MC thought that the third step was to cover the manure with seagull feathers. He crossed his arms and looked at the demons, thinking that even such a small amount of manure would have to ferment for a very long time. To produce enough manure for the vast lands, he would have to use all his subjects. This, of course, was not very good. Kratos furiously thought that he must do this as soon as possible. He will achieve everything, because he has the power. Sometime later, under the bright moon, in a house in the demon village, Flute's dad, Duroc, is sitting by his daughter's bed. Flute turned to her dad and he asked, "What is it?" Flute, looking tired, asked her father to eat her. Duroc got angry and screamed. Hadn't he told her not to even think about such a thing? Flute burst into tears and said she missed her mother. Duroc became frightened and reminisced. A huge monster loomed over Flute and exclaimed that it was hungry. She began to cry in fear. The monster quickly opened its mouth. Flute's mother immediately stood in front of her daughter and raised her hands. Flute looked at her mother in horror. The monster quickly ate her mother. Duroc emerged from his memories and asked, "If his daughter is gone, then why should he live on?" He turned his head to the side in fear. Duroc looked at the protagonist and called out to his majesty. MC asked ominously if Duroc still had the strength to scream. He ordered him to be taken away. Duroc asked to wait and exclaimed that he had a daughter. If he left her alone, greater demons would eat her. Flute called out to her dad, and Baal carried Duroc out of the house. Kratos seriously asked how many they had collected. Zephyros replied 20 demons and needed 30 more. The protagonist turned his head to the side and looked at Flute. He remembered the past. Flute, lying fearfully on the ground, looked at aged Kimchi. The protagonist pressed the joystick button. Aged Kimchi swung his sword. Flute raised her hand with tears in her eyes. MC came out of his memories and turned his head to the side. He ordered everyone to stop eating each other, under pain of death. Kratos asked the advisor to gather the required number of demons for him. The protagonist confidently ordered the demons to go to fertilizer production. MC sternly thought that he was a demon lord. Tyranny was what he needed to achieve his goals, and Kratos would somehow tolerate the damage to his reputation. Sometime later, under the evening sky, Duroc struck the ground with his mace. He noticed that they had been devoting their last strength to this useless endeavor for a couple of days. Farming was simply ridiculous. The demon ordered Duroc to shut up, or he would lose his head. Duroc sternly replied that they would not survive in any case. They would make this soil fertile, and then what? They had nothing to sow. The protagonist appeared ominously behind him and clarified, "Was the demon interested in sowing?" Dyrok turned to the overlord in fear, and MC ordered him to go. Kratos thought that day he had noticed a small pink flower. Now that was it, he could plant it. Dyrok looked at the flower and asked, "Is that all?" The protagonist agreed and said that they would plant such flowers. Baal and the others had already gathered them for him from all over the area. Dyrok tensed up and, after apologizing, noted that the roots of this flower were inedible. They were poisonous and caused such a burning sensation in the stomach that one could die. Kratos pulled the flower out of the ground and asked, "They don't have any other root vegetables, do they?" He'd check right now to see if it was edible. Dyrok was surprised, and the protagonist turned his head to the side. MC said horrifyingly that Dyrok's daughter had already been given this root vegetable to eat. Dyrok was terrified and ran away screaming. He wondered, why is this? Why is the king poisoning his innocent daughter? I hope she doesn't eat it. Dyrok anxiously opened the door and asked Flute not to eat it. His daughter turned to her father, and Dyrok was stunned. Flute, happily eating the root vegetable, exclaimed that she ate it, but it didn't hurt at all. She was so full. Dyrok shook with tension and asked if she really didn't feel any pain. Flute agreed and replied that Zephyros and Baal had fed her these fruits yesterday and everything was fine. MC asked sternly, "Does Dyrok trust him now?" Long ago, people from a distant land discovered a way to eat this root vegetable. They began cultivating it and solved the food shortage. Kratos smiled ominously and said it was called a potato. Flute smiled happily and thanked His Majesty for caring so much about such a simple girl like her. The system window notified that the protagonist's subject was happy. MC had earned his first happy point. Kratos looked at the system window in amazement. Flute looked at the king with gratitude. The protagonist sternly recalled Flute's past and thought that, even though he was a demon lord, he didn't have to be so serious all the time. MC smiled menacingly and replied that Flute just needed to eat well and grow big. The demons tensed up, thinking that the king wanted to fatten her up to eat her later. The protagonist is absolute evil, the heart of the demonic domain, Chavin de Huantar. The road to the castle is divided into 4 zones, 1, 2, 3, and 4 stars. At night, the temperature is below freezing, and during the day, the sun is scorching. This climate is reminiscent of a hellish highland. Many centuries ago, the people of Huantar suffered from hunger, so they found a way to eat wild potatoes which were poisonous when raw. So what, did they die? They know what people are like. They've always invented ways to eat things considered poisonous. Dyrok raised his hand and exclaimed that they had spread the potatoes. The protagonist furiously exclaimed that this was good and ordered Baal to crush them. Baal enthusiastically raised his fists and shouted. He jumped over the potato field. Baal landed on the potatoes with tremendous force. They freeze the root vegetables for 5 nights. Then they thaw them in the open air, and Baal crushes them with his ability, Meteorite Fall. This way, the poison from the root vegetables will flow out and evaporate. They freeze, thaw, crush, and dry. After drying, they can be stored and cooked. It is a complete food product. MC ordered the advisor to gather the farmers busy producing manure. He turned his head terrifyingly to the side and announced that it was time for lunch. Kratos thought, the demons will like this, right? After a while, the protagonist clarified that there is little food, so each of them has 2 potatoes. Zephyros noted that there are still a lot of unprocessed potatoes left. Maybe they will make more? MC replied that he would not say it was a lot. It is not enough for his entire army. The remaining potatoes will go to planting. They will multiply their number 1,000-fold. The demons looked at the potato in bewilderment and asked, "Isn't it a poisonous root? How can you eat it?" A demon relative once ate this root and died. Dyrok picked up the potato and said that he had told the demons the same thing. Their lord had found a way to cook it so that the root was edible. Flute had eaten it many times and was fine. The demon irritably called him a fool and asked him to just look at his lord's face. The protagonist smiled terrifyingly, and the demon clarified, "Does the king resemble someone who wants to feed them?" The king wanted them to die in agony. Dyrok quickly shoved the potato into his mouth, and the demon screamed, "Has Dyrok really gone mad?" Dyrok calmly chewed the potato and swallowed it. He burst into tears of happiness and exclaimed, "Long live the demon lord." Seeing Dyrok eat first, the demons followed his example. The demons looked at the protagonist with gratitude and thought that their lord had given them real food. They raised their hands and shouted jubilantly. MC thought sternly that he didn't like this chant. He'd have to change it. Zephyros looked at the Lord and thought that from the determined expression on MC's face, it was clear that the king was absolutely confident he could produce food in their arid region. Maybe MC really could solve the hunger problem. The system window notified that Kratos' subjects were happy and well fed. 50 happy points received. The protagonist grinned and thought that was good. Now he could buy a small buff. However, to level him up first, he couldn't decide yet. Maybe it would be better to collect more points for now. They needed to split the farmers, busy harvesting potatoes in the area and producing fertilizer. Zephyros ordered the demons to listen. When they return home, they must tell everyone that their master has found a way to cultivate these desert lands and grow crops. They will give food coupons to each demon who collects wild potatoes, for processed, ready-to-eat potatoes. Kratos looked at the advisor and thought that Zephyros was as smart as he looked. The advisor can be annoying, of course, but on the other hand, he is his most effective assistant. Common demons must find more potatoes for MC. Some will be busy processing the harvested potatoes. Others will produce fertilizer. Kratos agreed and ordered them to take 10 more steps. He disagreed and ordered them to take a step back. The demons stuck a lightning rod with Asura into the ground. The protagonist launched a lightning attack at Asura and thought that in the meantime he would fertilize the soil with nitrogen. Enough manure has been produced. Now the next step. The fertilizer needs to be evenly distributed throughout the territory, but the territory is too large. The workers' quota is 2 potatoes a day. They don't have the strength for such a task. Asura irritably called the protagonist a freak and asked Kratos to eat him already. MC struck Asura and thought it was a great demon general. Asura doesn't need food, and he's been enduring torture for a long time. Does the protagonist really have no other choice? After a while, Kratos, sitting on his throne, asked if the advisor really requested reinforcements from the Star Lords. Zephyros agreed and explained that he had written an order on Kratos' behalf to end the offensive on several fronts and recall as many soldiers as possible to assist with the agriculture. They sent messengers to all the generals commanding each zone, but no one had responded yet. The protagonist looked away in irritation and wondered if the messengers had simply died of hunger on the way. But he had too few men to fertilize the land. Meanwhile, in the demonic lands, in the zone of the first star, there are cliffs of the dead. Saruthul's advisor, Ficamir, kneeling, reported that Lord Kratos had indeed taken up agriculture and even produced some food. Saruthul, the lord of the first star and father of the dead, clarified that the protagonist was doing this because he feared him. After all, the more demons died in the war, the stronger he became. Kratos had deliberately stopped the war, and now MC wanted to deal with the famine as well, so that fewer demons died, all in order to limit his power. Saruthul clarified that Ficamir had dealt with the messengers heading to the other Star Lords. Ficamir agreed and replied that they were unaware of the end of the war and agriculture. Saruthul sternly said that the demons should die of hunger. Then they would become his food and army. So he would kill Kratos and become the lord of the demons. Saruthul addressed the advisor, and Ficamir raised his head. Saruthul terrifyingly said that he wanted the advisor to destroy the fields and everything connected to them. After a while, Asurat was shivering from the cold. Ficamir looked at him and noted that Kratos was cruel. The protagonist had turned Asurat into a living corpse to make an example of him. Ficamir asked Asurat not to worry, as Lord Saruthul appreciated his aggressiveness. The lord would accept Asurat after killing Kratos. He raised his hand and commanded the ghosts to destroy the fields, so that no one would ever be able to grow anything on them. The ghosts resolutely ran toward the fields. The ghost pointed to the ground and clarified that this was the very fertilizer the scout had spoken of. Ficamir ordered it to be scattered all over the land and laughed. He asked the ghosts to spread the fertilizer throughout the area so that the demons could no longer collect it. Fertilizer must be mixed with the soil and buried deep. Asurat noticed the screaming Ficamir. He remembered the past. Zephyros asked what they should do. The protagonist replied that the manure needed to be ground into a small fraction, distributed evenly, and mixed with the soil. This was very hard work, and their farmers couldn't handle it. Asurat snapped out of his memories. Ficamir raised his hands and shouted that Kratos was over. Asurat looked at the army of ghosts in bewilderment. After a while, the ghosts breathed a sigh of relief. Ghost number 1341, sitting tiredly on a stone, said that there was no end to this. Ghost number 2718 ordered his comrade not to rest. If they didn't bury at least some of the fertilizer, the demon lord would make this land fertile. Ghost number 1341 tilted his head to the side and remarked that number 2718 had never been known for his diligence. Why was the ghost trying so hard? The ghost agreed with number 1341. Ghost number 2718 replied that he didn't know. It's just that when he looks at how much land they've already plowed, he's filled with a sense of pride, as if they've done something significant. Ghost number 1341 snorted in irritation and called his comrade a fool. He joyfully threw the soil aside with his hands and exclaimed that he too would be a fool today. There's very little left, and they're doing well, aren't they? The sun rose over the field. The ghosts shouted that they'd worked so hard that they'd lost track of time. They would die, but it wouldn't be a death in vain, because they fulfilled their duty. The ghosts quickly disappeared under the sun. Ficamir burst into tears, standing under an umbrella. He noted that they'd completed the task and could go where it was good. Ficamir lowered his head and said that they'd see what Kratos had to say about it. At the same time, the protagonist said that the plowing would be long today, but the preparations for it had also taken a long time. MC looked at the multitude of potatoes and noticed that the root vegetables were dormant. They wouldn't sprout even if they were planted. Kratos thought it was as if a peacefully sleeping potato were suddenly pulled out of its earthen bed by its hair. It fainted from stress and went into hibernation. 3 to 4 weeks at 4 degrees Celsius, and their hibernation would end. Then they would need to be moved to a dark, warm place. The protagonist would have ordered Sergei to create such a temperature here using cold magic, but now she was angry. Hartok was also plotting something. If MC angered them, he couldn't handle both of them. They needed to find another way. Kratos wanted to increase the temperature in the barn to 23 degrees. so he made the workers do squats, but they were too weak and tired quickly. The protagonist decisively turned around and ordered Zephyros to go to the fields. He thought he would do what he could. MC needed to work on saturating the soil with nitrogen. After a while, MC looked at the plowed field. He wondered in amazement what this was. All the topsoil had been plowed up, and the air smelled of fertilizer. The land was plowed and ready for sowing. Was this some kind of miracle? Fikimir grinned maliciously, hiding behind a tree, and thought the king's mouth had dropped open in surprise. This was simply a success. Baal stood sternly behind Fikimir. He grabbed his opponent by the hood and said that this one had been hiding. Fikimir grunted in pain and ordered him to let go. The protagonist thought it was Fikimir, one of the bosses of Dead Rock. Had Fikimir really come at his call? But why alone? MC sternly asked what the boss was doing here. Fikimir became frightened, and Kratos immediately punched him in the face. Zephyros asked why the king was hitting him without giving him a chance to answer. The protagonist looked at the advisor and replied that he thought the enemy was hiding something from him. Beating him is the best way to prevent this. Fikimir remarked that the Lord was cruel, but Fikimir, wouldn't tell him anything. MC dealt Fikimir numerous blows. He turned around, breathing heavily, and said he was very tired. The system window notified him that he needed to increase his stats by exchanging them for happy points. MC used 50 happy points to increase his stamina. 30%. Kratos dealt blows to the enemy, and Fikimir yelled that he would talk. He was ordered to ruin Kratos' crop fields, so that everyone would starve. After some time, they returned to the castle. The protagonist noted that it was Saruthul who killed their messenger. It was logical. The more demons die, the larger Saruthul's army. Zephyros clarified that Saruthul was a rebel. This opened an opportunity for the Lord. If the Lord of the First Star were executed, the demons who were unhappy with the cancellation of the offensive on human lands would take it as a warning. MC thought they would still try to sabotage his farming. He really needed to solve this problem once and for all. The advisor clarified that killing Saruthul wasn't that easy. Kratos replied that he knew this. Saruthul could become intangible, like a ghost. The protagonist reflected that in the game, Saruthul was stalking the player throughout the entire First Star Zone, which was already a very difficult level. The entire playthrough consisted of a deadly game of hide-and-seek with Saruthul. If the pest is difficult to kill because it's hiding in a hole, you need to drag it out of its hole. MC's eyes widened in horror. At the same time, Flute calmly looked at Asura. He ominously asked, "What is she looking at?" Flute awkwardly scratched her cheek. She quickly lowered her head and replied that she heard that thanks to his sacrifice, they would have a harvest. Flute joyfully thanked him. Asura screamed with rage. How dare she mock him? He will kill this little child. Flute ran to the side in fear and screamed. Asura thought in anger that as soon as he was free, he would kill Kratos. The protagonist exclaimed that they were all together now. Asura turned his attention to him. MC screamed, "What joy is this?" The demons shouted with enthusiasm, standing in front of the second lightning rod, Fikimir. Asura was surprised and thought, is it really a second lightning rod? So now he is free? Asura cried with happiness and thought, he won't have to endure this every day anymore. After some time, Asura was placed next to Fikimir. MC furiously struck them. Asura thought they meant there would now be two of them. Kratos struck the lightning rods with a few more lightning bolts. At the same time, Saruthul looked at the magic ball. He felt intense pain and screamed that it was his right hand. The protagonist dealt a horrific blow. Fikimir screamed in pain. Saruthul burst into tears and exclaimed that it was very painful. MC ominously waved his bloody hand. Fikimir screamed in horror, and Saruthul asked him not to do it and stop. MC stopped and looked away. Kratos thought it was the scout that appears in the game, and the scout was watching him intently. The protagonist clenched his teeth in anger and thought that he would make Saruthul regret that the boss of the First Star tried to destroy his crops. After a while, the bright rays of the sun illuminated the sky. Flute calmly stuck her shovel into the ground. Asura noticed her. He asked what the child was doing there. Flute noticed him and explained that the Demon King and the 4 heavenly rulers, all adults, try to farm, so she wants to help somehow. Asura smirked and noted that she was still a stupid demoness from a lower class, but Fikimir plowed the entire neighboring field, although one should always do something useful. Flute looked at Fikimir and thanked him. She noted that he plowed the field and became a lightning rod. Fikimir smiled tenderly and said that she was very sweet. Now he feels that everything was not in vain. Asura noted that this child has no taste. What is so good about cultivating a field? What is the point of trying to grow something on this abandoned land? These damned potatoes haven't even sprouted. Although they say that if you heat up a warehouse with potatoes, they will immediately sprout. They'll die of hunger anyway. Flute ran quickly and thanking him, exclaimed, "Sprouted potatoes." Asurat called out to her, but Flute didn't even turn around. Asurat grinned tenderly and asked, "What can I get from this child?" After a while, they returned to the castle. Zephyros, following the protagonist, said that he had doubts about the Overlord's plan. Saruthul probably realized that this was a trap, so would he come to save Fikimir? MC replied that of course he wouldn't. First, he would send people to Saruthul so that Saruthul would jump off the cliff himself. They would have to kill all of this invader's men, so that not a single one would remain. At the same time, Baal and the demons stood before Fikimir. A scout flew over the demons. After a while, Saruthul called Kratos a fool. Does the protagonist really think that if he set up camp, his warriors will come to him? It's a shame about Fikimir, but he only has one real goal: to destroy agriculture. Saruthal ordered the spirits of gluttony to go. At the same time, the spirits quickly headed towards the hangar. Saruthal ordered them to destroy and trample all the potatoes. The spirits flew into the hangar and stopped. The protagonist noted that this was to be expected. He knew the spirits of gluttony would come here. MC grinned madly and said that he was welcome to their grave. The spirits looked at the protagonist with their mouths open. Kratos thought that when he first encountered the spirits of gluttony in the game, he didn't understand how to deal with them. This is the second army of Saruthal's followers. Of course, the problem is that they always attack in groups, but even if you just touch them, they become surprisingly annoying monsters that keep up and quickly age the player, while copying all skills. Nevertheless, there's a way to kill these freaks. Kratos resolutely dug his claws into his hand and shouted, "Who should I fry first?" He thought it was a lightning attack. The spirit, frightened, exclaimed that it was a trap and ordered his comrades to escape. The protagonist smiled terrifyingly and shouted that the real trap was yet to come. The spirits looked at the door and asked, "What is that? Could that really be blood?" MC thought it was Kratos' blood, which he had applied earlier. And then comes the spell that Kratos uses in the second phase. The protagonist swiftly struck the blood on the floor with lightning. The lightning spread across the room and flew to the door. MC thought it was a blood strike. A bright light filled the room and the spirits screamed. Kratos shouted that physical attacks could now be used against them. He summoned troops. The demons quickly jumped into the hangar. They furiously rushed to fight the spirits. The protagonist thought that even though these farmers might not look strong, they were from the final map after all. Their physical damage is simply unmatched. What's going on? MC feels like a true alpha demon king, merciless and so smart too. Or maybe he fits into this world quite well? Kratos looked at the flying spirits and thought that they had not been fried yet. He quickly attacked the spirit and thought he could deal with the enemy on his own. The protagonist listened tensely to the scream. He looked at Flute, who was sitting in the potato. MC was frightened and wondered how long she had been there. The spirit of gluttony flew swiftly towards her. Dyrok called out to his daughter with great fear. Kratos wondered why there were always sweet potatoes among the potatoes. He needed to kill another fugitive. What should he do? The blood wouldn't reach that spot. Flute threw a potato towards the spirit. The protagonist tensed up and wondered why she had thrown the potato at them. The potato hit the spirit's head and bounced off. The spirit quickly aimed its tongue at the potato. Its tongue turned red as it gripped the root vegetable. MC was stunned and froze in place. The spirit shrank and flew out of the sprouted potato. Flute turned her attention to the fallen spirit. The spirits quickly flew out of the hangar. Kratos wondered in amazement, were those sprouts? Spirits accelerate aging, and they restarted the potato's stopped biological clock. The protagonist calmly picked Flute up. He smiled terrifyingly and said she was doing well. Flute froze in fear and began shaking. MC called for the farmers' attention and exclaimed that the operation to lure out Saruthal had been stopped. Kratos picked up a potato, smiled menacingly, and exclaimed that it was now more profitable for them to invade Saruthal. Time passed. Asura opened his eyes and wondered where he was. Who was he and what was he living for? Seeing the rays of the sun, he thought it was so beautiful. It was the source of life. He was grateful to be able to meet it face to face. His stomach growled loudly and he thought he was hungry. Even in this state, he still had a thirst for life. Flute distracted him from his thoughts. She thanked him for telling her about the potatoes. Everything worked out in the end. She was even given dried potatoes as a reward. Lord Kratos gathered all the farmers and went with them to plant potatoes. His eyes were fixed on the dried potatoes. He opened his mouth wide and began shaking his head, mentally asking her to give him food, and she asked if he was hungry. She took a potato, swung it hard, and threw it at him, clearly hitting him in the eye. He got really angry and yelled that he would kill her, and she apologized to him, suggesting that he try again. She threw it at him, hitting him in the second eye, but the third time, everything finally worked. When the treasured piece of potato fell on his tongue, he swallowed it and, with tears in his eyes, thought that it was so delicious. Meanwhile, MC received a notification that some warriors of the Demon King's army felt happiness from delicious food. He earned 1 point. His HP level was 302. He thought that this time, for the dried potatoes and the new farmers, he was given 300 points. And what did he get the rest for? He decided not to dwell on it and thought that the more HP, the better. They would be useful to him in the fight against Saruthal. He would definitely find a use for them. He told the farmers it was time to attack. They let out their battle cry and approached the bridge leading to Saruthal Cave. And on the other side appeared his minions with axes in their hands. They broke the ropes, causing the bridge to fall, and laughed, asking what they would do now. But MC didn't stop. He jumped straight into the abyss. They already thought that he would reach them, but when they saw that he didn't reach them, they laughed at him and called him an idiot. He just went and jumped off the cliff. But MC was not so simple. Right now, he clung to the wall, and when they saw his bare buttocks, they were a little embarrassed. The Demon King began to quickly climb up, taking off and putting on clothes, and in the eyes of the ghosts, he looked very creepy. So they decided to escape. Meanwhile, he successfully climbed into the cave and thought that everything was according to plan. He turned to his subjects and gave them a sign, and they showed him that they understood. Then he ran deeper into the cave, thinking how smart he was to have guessed that the spirits of gluttony would be afraid of potatoes. But what if he burst in alone, barehanded? Seeing him, Saruthul joyfully exclaimed that he was all alone and didn't have those potatoes. He commanded the spirits of gluttony to follow him. They just needed to touch him, and victory would be theirs. They headed toward him, and he concentrated, thinking that it was time for the final attack, quantum leap travel. He jumped onto the wall and began to quickly climb it. Suddenly, his bare buttocks disappeared from view, and one of the spirits of gluttony nervously exclaimed that it didn't like how he was moving. Since when had he learned to walk through walls? Another spirit warned the others that he was above, after which they flew after him, but he disappeared underground and reappeared each time, making it impossible for them to catch him. Moving forward, Kratos thought that he had completed the game 19 times, so he knew this map 100%. He needed to go through all the regions where they spawned, and gather them all in one place. When the number of his pursuers greatly increased, he stopped in the main cave and caught his breath, and the spirits, realizing that he was exhausted, pounced on him and exclaimed that even the Demon King has his limits. He said with a serious expression that he was not the Demon King now, he was a veteran player. At that moment, Zephyros screamed, giving the signal, and the farming demons emerged from numerous passages and began throwing potatoes at the spirits, causing them to disappear and the root vegetables to sprout. Kratos spread his arms wide, enjoying the spectacle, while Zephyros thought that he had been skeptical at first, but this time the Demon King had been right. He remembered what he had told him just recently. While he was leading all the spirits to one place, he would take command of the farmers and lead them along this map. He carefully examined the map of the old canal that MC had given him and said that it was a dead end with nothing there. MC chuckled and said that he was wrong. There was one secret shortcut there. Now Kratos stood in the potato rain and thought about it. He had discovered this path after a thorough search. When he was escaping the terrible cliff of the dead before entering the final map, he saw a wall and thought that there was nothing there. What was he even trying for? But he noticed that the textures were somehow different and tried to hit the wall, and then it disappeared. It turned out to be an illusion. He discovered where these paths connect, in the cave leading to the first battle with Saruthul. It can only be reached after clearing it. There, he was able to obtain the elixir of transformation, and if it was still there, he would need to save it. This elixir allows one to change one's appearance at will. When all the spirits of gluttony disappeared, the farmers rushed to collect potatoes and were overjoyed. Duroc burst into tears of happiness and said that now they could live with full bellies. His friend looked at him with a smile, while MC's face darkened, and he remembered his grandmother, who, with a smile, promised to feed him a full dinner. But something happened that evening, and he ended up watching her being taken away in an ambulance. He looked down and said that he was just trying to feed them, and that he was getting in the way. He headed towards the fight in a rage, but Baal stopped him. He said Saruthul was dangerous and offered to help him, but he ordered him to haul potatoes, which was a job for the leader. The demon couldn't object, so he went alone to Saruthul, who was meanwhile casting a spell over the great heart of the ice spirit, asking it to capture more spirits with its almighty frost, so that he could gain more warriors and strength. Kratos quickly approached him and hit him on the head, pinning him to the pedestal. Saruthul looked at him in surprise and exclaimed, "How did he know he was here?" He replied that now was not the time to chat, it was time to destroy the pests. Saruthul called him stupid and asked if he had come here to defeat him alone. He turned into smoke and said that he hadn't yet seen his true powers. MC replied in his mind that, in fact, he had seen everything, and 19 times at that. If he continues to pursue Saruthul, who runs through every corner of these rocks, he will constantly encounter his warriors, and eventually kill almost all the mobs here, and then he will escape to the room where the heart of the ice spirit is. This is a terrible artifact, which is said to have been created at the cost of the life of an ancient dragon. So the dead linger in the world of the living with the help of the chilling frost. He will try to summon more warriors with this power. But before that, a paladin appears and the final battle begins. And right now, he is using one of his abilities. The chilling mist rose higher, began to transform, and Saruthul said that he was strong, but he would win this battle. He took his form, already anticipating victory, and Kratos thought that this was a copy skill. He takes on the form of an opponent and copies their stats. When he played, he adopted the same stats as his character, who became even stronger by the end of the game. With a powerful attack and a nearly cheating dodge, he managed to land a blow at the last moment. But now that he's copying the Demon King, that means he's not that strong. He grinned widely, and Saruthul charged at him with a loud cry. Meanwhile, he opened the system window and used 50 HP to raise his agility to 30%. He masterfully dodged his opponent's attack, then struck him in the chest, causing drool to fly from his mouth and tears to well up in his eyes. Despite this, he charged again, and this time, MC increased his power to 30%, and their fists clashed. Saruthul screamed in pain and exclaimed, "Why is he perfectly fine?" He smirked and said that farming requires a good mind, and his opponent turned to him in rage and shouted something, preparing to attack him. Meanwhile, he used HP and increased his magic power and intelligence to 30%. They both swung their arms and struck with lightning, but Kratos seemed stronger, and his strike landed on Saruthul. While he was being electrocuted, He screamed loudly, and when it was over, he turned into a shapeless mass, fell to the ground, and no longer moved, only twitching slightly. The system reported that he had used up his HP and increased all stats by 1 level. The stat-boosting quest was complete. As a reward, he gains access to new abilities, the Farmer's Throne Summoning. The summoning cost is 100 HP. This is the throne where the King of Farmers sits, and it can be used to equip various sturdy farming tools. He rubbed his chin thoughtfully and thought that was good. He needed a lot of new equipment. A formless mass called out to him, then suddenly rose into the air and asked, did he think that was it? MC noted that the second phase should now begin, and Sarathul, transforming into a huge beast, said that this was his source of power. This is what an ancient evil dragon looks like. Kratos, slightly surprised, said that he was huge, and also had a very strong attack and a ton of health. It's not for nothing that he was the final boss of the region, after all. But he didn't care. He grinned, and when his warriors knocked down the doors and entered the cave, he asked, what if all the inhabitants of the region came here? Looking at this army of farmers, Sarathul became nervous and suggested that they talk first. But they all pounced on him and started poking him with pitchforks, rakes and other tools, asking with displeasure how he dared to interfere with their farming. Let him die quickly. They all pushed him to the ground, and he screamed loudly, begging them to spare him, while MC thought that he could probably defeat him himself. But he was still talking and moving, so killing him with his own hands seemed somehow wrong. Are they still exhausted? Even if they beat him for so long, he won't die. They need to beat this snake a little more effectively. He activated the Farmer's Throne summoning skill, and clouds thickened in the sky, in the center of which a bright glow appeared. The throne began to descend from the sky at high speed. It fell right on the dragon's head, and a roar was heard. Kratos was greatly surprised, and when the farmers saw that nothing remained of the dragon, they rejoiced greatly and exclaimed that this was what they had expected from the Demon King. He crushed the dragon's head with a single blow and finished it off. It was monstrous, truly cruel. They, pathetic little insects, would never compare to him. They began to praise Kratos, and he, succumbing to the atmosphere, also began to rejoice. Meanwhile, Fikomir sensed something and realized he was flying to the afterlife. Turning into a ghost, he flew away, and Asura remained here alone. All the fields were plowed, the potatoes sprouted, and the pests that threatened the crops were destroyed. Now it was finally time to plant potatoes. Kratos and the other farmers headed to the fields in anticipation, but a sound was heard. The ice spirit's heart trembled. MC turned around to check, and the system reported that he had captured Sarathul Rock 20 times. He was surprised that this time was added to the 19 times he had completed the game, and the system told him that a secret event had been unlocked as a reward. The source of power locked in the ice spirit's heart awakened. The air around the heart became frosty. Then it opened, and Kratos approached to check what was going on. A small dragon, not yet fully awake from sleep, emerged from the ice spirit's heart, and MC was confused to see this small creature. When the dragon opened its eyes and saw the Demon King, it rejoiced and, noticing that it was approaching him, thought, was this creature his dad? Kratos picked it up, and it closed its eyes, thinking that it was so scared in the egg because it was dark there, but now it had hatched. Finally, Dad had found it, but when he saw his dad smiling widely and evilly, he trembled with fear. After that, they returned to the field. The farmers victoriously punched the air and let out a victory cry, telling the Demon King to chew him up and eat him. While they were shouting this, the poor dragon began to cry in fear. Finally, MC could not stand it and turned to his subjects, shouting that they were fools. If he grew up, they would be able to eat even more. Having learned that Dad wanted to eat him, the dragon cried even harder. Looking ahead, Kratos stopped, noticing how the demons joyfully greeted them and praised them for their excellent work. Everyone began to hug their families, and the dragon felt such warmth radiating from them all. They did not seem scary at all. He looked at his dad, and seeing his smile, he took his words back. Soon they returned to the Demon King's palace. The poor baby dragon sat in the corner, shaking with fear. Every time he glanced at his dad, he saw his furious expression and became even more scared, thinking that he was waiting for him to grow up. But in reality, MC was thinking about what to feed him. They say that dragons feed on precious stones, but he only had rusty iron here. He was distracted by Zephyros, who came with a report. As he expected, they were having trouble creating raised beds. Kratos warily grabbed his head and said that he thought so. To plant crops, you need to raise the soil between the furrows or boundaries of the plot, and obviously, only soil is needed for their construction, but here it is too rocky. When he came to check on the farmers, he saw them ripping stones out of the soil with tools. Looking at them, the dragon thought they were all slaves. Was he really going to be treated like this? MC, meanwhile, grimaced in displeasure and thought that this wasn't a field, but some kind of mine. At this rate, they'd spend a lot of time clearing the field of stones. If they recruited so many people too often, the dried potato reserves would run out very quickly, and even if other lords sent helpers, it wouldn't solve the problem. He clenched his teeth in frustration and thought that he really wished that, like the main character from some manhwa, he could summon a beast, like a wombat or something, that would simply clear the entire field of stones. He glanced at Flute, who was trying to plow the soil despite sweat pouring off her from exhaustion. and his face smoothed out slightly. He mentally told himself to stop whining. He needed to think of some way. That's what farming was like. Unforeseen problems kept popping up. Suddenly, the demon's anxious voice rang out, warning the others about the blade wind. MC immediately turned around and saw a huge whirlwind nearby, rushing straight at them, and he gritted his teeth in frustration, realizing he'd completely forgotten about it. While he was playing the game, blade winds would appear randomly in these wastelands. If they were sucked inside, they would be chopped into mince. He waved his hand and excitedly told his subjects to run and hide behind the rock. They needed to run to where the shadow fell and lay as low as possible on the ground. They all obeyed him and ran under the rock, and he followed them, thinking the epicenter was still far away, but the wind was already so strong. In the game, it was just a joke. Natural disasters are the main enemy of agriculture. But for some reason, Flute ran in the opposite direction. Seeing this, he turned around in surprise and realized she was running after Asura. Her father rushed after her, and Kratos cursed in displeasure, then gave the small dragon to the demon and ordered him to look after it. Anyone who followed him would die. He ran after the girl, and Baal exclaimed that it was too dangerous, he would die. He clenched his teeth and mentally answered that he knew this himself, but he could not lose his precious workers and the lightning rod. Farming is not just quietly picking pears and apples to relax. Seeing the girl, Asura exclaimed, "What is she doing? Let her get out of here right now." But she did not listen to him and tried to move the pillar, and MC meanwhile ran towards them, thinking that farming is life and war itself. He ordered her to leave, and before she could move, he rushed over her head and kicked the pillar, breaking it, and Asura immediately fell down. He fell face first to the ground, and at that very moment, the wind of blades reached them, and small cuts began to appear on their bodies. Despite this, Flute tried to untie Asura, and he exclaimed that this rope immobilizes 4 generals, and she won't untie it, so she should quickly get out of here. Kratos picked her up and threw the pole with Asura over his shoulder, while the dragon thought that he could feel the power of this creature. His dad wasn't strong at all. Letting out a piercing cry, MC used all his strength and rushed to a safe place, and the dragon began to watch him with concern. Despite the heavy load, he ran toward them, enduring the pain, but at one point he couldn't bear it and fell to the ground, clutching the girl to himself so that she wouldn't hurt herself. The whirlwind was very close, and seeing this, the dragon thought that despite his dad being weak, he was a kind creature, which is why he rushed to his aid. He flew closer to the whirlwind, puffed out his cheeks, and then released a powerful stream of frosty wind, causing it to slow. Noticing that the blade wind had weakened, Kratos wondered if the frost had really done this. The dragon exerted more force, and with each passing second, his frosty breath grew weaker. MC, noticing this, closed his eyes and thought he couldn't do it. Eventually, the blade wind froze, and while it weakened, his subjects carried him and the others to safety. Some time passed, MC lay on his bed, recovering, and so the generals decided to act. Hartok and Sergei headed to his chambers. Now that the Demon King had fallen, they would slit his throat. And then, when they overthrew Baal and Asura, one of them would become the Demon King. Until then, they were allies. Drawing their weapons and releasing their demonic power, they approached Kratos' bed and were about to finish him off, but for some reason, they froze in fear. They saw his bestial grin and eyes looking straight at them, and shuddered, thinking that he knew they were coming, and was waiting for them with his eyes wide open. But since their chance to do so was only now, they pounced on him, but they were stopped. 2 other generals appeared and asked what they were doing. Baal said he was sleeping, so they should not wake him. Upon learning that he was sleeping like this, they were very surprised and thought that he was definitely the Demon King. Baal said that if they woke him up, he wouldn't let it go so easily. Hartok called him an idiot and turned to Asura, asking if he was also on the Farmer King's side. He replied that he owed him his life once, so he decided to repay him. Next time, he would be on their side. Hartok asked if he was completely out of his mind. Even planting 1 potato could cause a whole host of problems. Didn't he understand that there would be a crop failure and everyone would die of hunger? He replied that perhaps that was the case. He remembered Flute working diligently in the field and confidently declared that no one would starve because he had risked his life for this. Well, he also liked to fight, risking his life. Hartok said that they would regret this and left with Sergei. After this, Kratos let out a long sigh, and the demons, hearing that he had woken up, turned to him. He looked at Asura in surprise and called him. The demon smiled contentedly and asked, did he hear everything? In fact, he was on the neutral side, but he was glad that he had managed to repay him. But MC didn't care about this. He exclaimed, what kind of lightning rod is this that walks and talks? Asura looked at him in shock, and then lightning struck him, and his piercing scream was heard. After this, they went to the fields, since they had no time to waste, and they needed to gather everyone to remove the stones from the field. Baal informed the king that there were almost no stones left. Zephyros was in charge of everyone. Kratos was slightly surprised by his words, and then saw how the farmers were already planting the field under the direction of Zephyros. He called out to him in surprise, and asked how they were able to remove all the stones. He pointed his finger to the side and said that they were there. Right now, T-Bong was circling above the field, collecting all the stones in his mouth, then chewing them and swallowing them, thinking that he was too small and couldn't stop the blade winds. But if he ate well, he would grow up quickly. Kratos called out to him loudly and waved his arms, and the little dragon was very happy to see him. He immediately flew down to him, and Kratos, stroking his head, laughed and said that he was so cute. After that, he thought that the blade winds didn't come often, and he needed time to grow. If T-Bong gets a cold blast mid-flight, he can stop the blade's winds in advance. This isn't the best option, but since there's no weather forecast here, there's nothing to be done. Now that the field is prepared, they can begin planting potatoes. Zephyros said that the supply of dried potatoes that was given as a reward is quickly depleting. Should they stock up? He replied that there was no need and thought that the first enemy of agriculture was natural disasters. Only then did all the expenses come in. He would have to overcome this obstacle too. Meanwhile, Sergi was resting in the castle. She sat in front of the mirror and, taking off her helmet, sighed heavily and tossed her hair, noticing that she smelled of manure. She hadn't even gone outside, and the stench still hadn't gone away. The king's voice was heard outside the room. Kratos said that he needed to tell her something, and she was slightly surprised because he had never come to her chambers before. She asked what he wanted and said that she had nothing to talk about with him. He said that he really needed her. Let her open the door. She irritably asked him not to use phrases that could be misunderstood, and he responded that if they did not see each other's faces, misunderstandings would definitely arise. She ordered him to leave, but he refused and said that he was already entering. Hearing this, she turned to the door in a rage and exclaimed that she was not going to talk to him, but fell silent mid-sentence when she saw him naked, making his way through the door. She screamed loudly in fear, and when he approached her, she exclaimed, "What was wrong with him? How could he so unceremoniously burst into a lady's chambers?" He ignored her indignation and knelt before her, which confused her, and stated that without her, he was capable of nothing. She looked at him in shock, then her cheeks flushed, and meanwhile he thought that he was even ready to kneel to save money. Now he really needs the sharp, precise sword Sergi. The demoness began to twirl her hair embarrassedly and said that since he says so, she will listen to what he wanted to tell her. She thought, why is he so suddenly? Unbelievable, it seems he really has gone crazy. After this, Kratos took her to the potato warehouse and asked her to cut these. The tubers needed to be cut in half before planting. Realizing what he really wanted, she stared at the potatoes in shock, then clenched her teeth in rage, tears in her eyes, thinking that this idiot had decided to play a joke on her. Kratos said that the job was simple. Potatoes with fewer than 3 eyes should not be cut. Those with 4 could and should be cut, and she should cut them so that each half had approximately the same number of sprouts. Did she understand everything? He took 2 potatoes and swung them, saying that the moment had come. She exclaimed in rage that she had not agreed to this, and at that very moment he threw a potato at her, and she immediately assumed a fighting stance and began furiously waving her swords, precisely cutting the potato in half. Kratos let out a surprised sigh, then examined the potatoes and exclaimed that it was incredible. How did she manage to cut them so precisely? He joyfully turned to her and exclaimed that he knew she had no equal. His words made her embarrassed again, and then she exclaimed in rage, does he think she is a complete fool? Does he really think she will believe these empty words? He is nothing but a liar, a scoundrel, and a swindler. He immediately walked towards her, which scared her, and then he silently grabbed her hand, which once again confused her, and she asked what was wrong with him. He silently took out a piece of cloth, wiped her sword, and she asked what he was doing now. He said that her blade was covered in potato juice. Of course, it needed to be wiped off. Because of this, her heart began to pound faster, and she thought that he had definitely gone crazy. What is wrong with him? What does that look? Why does it look like he's putting his heart and soul into it, and so tenderly at that? He looked at her sword with a smile, thinking that everything was clean now. If the blade isn't cleaned properly, the disease could spread to other potatoes, so the metal needed to be wiped thoroughly. He asked the girl to do it again, saying that no one could compare to her. In his mind, he added that she was a demoness who cut potatoes and saved dried potatoes. His actions and words sank deep into her soul, and she shyly replied that she would help him only this once, thinking that the stupid demon king couldn't do anything without her. Hearing her answer, he became very happy and said that he would bring her more hot water and rags, and that they would be cutting potatoes all night tonight. She silently called him an idiot and wondered why he was so happy. After that, they continued working, and Kratos told her to switch to her left hand. He would immediately wipe her sword. She angrily told him to stop stealthily grabbing her hands, and he apologized, asking if he was bothering her. Was he? She sheepishly said that she wouldn't kill him for that alone, and he happily said that he had a song that helped with the work. Meanwhile, Hartok stood on the second floor and, watching them cut potatoes and humming a song, thought that she too turned out to be empty-headed. A few flattering words, and she voluntarily became his slave. Meanwhile, Asura, as always, hung on the cross and thought about the meaning of life. What should a lightning rod live for? Life is created only for suffering. Flute distracted him from yet another gloomy thought. She came up to him and said that the adults had collected dried potatoes. She invited him to play Catch the Potato, and he asked, do you think one of the 4 generals would play with a worthless demon like her? Let her just untie him, and he would immediately eat her alive, not the potato. She ignored his words completely, and threw a potato at him, but missed, and he said he was such an idiot. She threw potatoes at him a few more times, and he asked, "Can't she aim better?" It hurt him. Hartok came to visit him. He thought that he was simply hopeless. Because of his own stupidity, he doomed himself to suffering. At that moment, Kratos came to the field and told the farmers that there were cut and dried potatoes. They could finally sow their field. Everyone happily rushed to him, and Hartok, looking at Bale, who was carrying a huge sack of potatoes, thought that he didn't expect much from him, since he was an idiot from the very beginning. Everyone here has lousy intelligence. Upon learning that it was Sergei who cut all the potatoes, the farmers began to thank her, and she embarrassedly looked away, telling them to shut up. Who said she did this for them? Hartok thought that she had such a ridiculous expression on her face. Could this really be the face of one of the 4 demonic generals? He turned his gaze to the farmers and wondered if it was she who brought them to tears. They were representatives of a great nation, weren't they ashamed? He, the genius Hartok of the demon race, would seize the throne of the demon king at all costs. Kratos, meanwhile, told the farmers to keep planting potatoes and to listen to him carefully. Very soon, sprouts would emerge from the ground. Once that happened, they would need to do something called plucking the eyes. Ball said he was good at plucking eyes. Whose eyes should he pluck? He replied that they would not pluck anyone's eyes, so he should keep his mouth shut. One seed potato would produce at least 3 sprouts, at best 5 or 6. The question is, which is better, fewer or more sprouts? The farmers told him that the more the better, and he said that was wrong, the less the better. Hartok, meanwhile, thought that they were so pathetic. Why was he teaching them this nonsense? Some of the farmers around him started discussing why this was so. After all, the more the better, it had always been. The Demon King was mistaken about something here. Hartok irritably called them pathetic idiots and asked, "Isn't it obvious if you think about it? The more sprouts there are, the more nutrients they will absorb. Will the nutrients then actually get into the fruit itself?" Hearing this, Kratos turned to him in surprise and asked where he got such knowledge. Had he studied farming before? He asked in response, "Is it really necessary to learn this? Sprouts and potato fruits are connected. They exchange nutrients. Isn't it obvious?" Kratos looked at him with a new look and asked how many sprouts he thought were needed. He irritably replied that of course 2 would be enough. If you think only about economy, you might decide that 1 sprout is enough. But if it accidentally breaks, the potato roots will die. Kratos looked confused and said that then they would have to try something else, and asked him what else he thought about it. And he said that this soil was artificially made healthy, so they should add compost and loosen the soil for air circulation. Then the soil would be suitable not only for potatoes, but also for unwanted weeds that would take away nutrients and need to be gotten rid of. If they all just thought about it, they would all understand. While he was saying all this, they looked at him in shock, and then Kratos pointed his finger at him and ordered the farmers to applaud him. He was an agricultural genius. All the farmers started chanting that he was a genius, and he grimaced in annoyance, then remembered that his mother always called him stupid. Because of this, he became emotional, and in order to hide his tears, he turned away from them and thought, "What's wrong with him? He's just like those idiots." The king approached him and, calling him the wisest among the demons, announced that from today he was the commander-in-chief of the agricultural corps. He mentally said that his intellect existed to kill and take, and the demon king turned to the others, asking discontentedly, what were they doing? Let them salute the most elite demon now. They punched the air, shouting that he was an elite, and he gritted his teeth in displeasure, and thought that these pathetic idiots were so noisy. But so be it. He would lead them for a while. He told them to properly follow his orders from now on, after which the farmers shouted joyfully. The system told Kratos that he had won 4 psychological battles, but he did not understand what it meant, and it explained everything to him. He understood the psychology of Baal, who had been neglected as a child, and made him his loyal subordinate. The always lonely Asura became less cruel after making friends. He melted the heart of Sergei, to whom he had never shown love before. He also inspired Hartok, who craved recognition. Now he can unlock a new skill, Bloody Eye. He wondered if this was in the game, or was it an original skill that the Earth shares? The system said that he can see the immediate future of the creature he looks at. He can look up to 6 hours ahead in the present. It makes no difference whether the object of observation is animate or inanimate. It can even be the sky. When he read this line, his eyes widened and he smirked, thinking, is this a weather forecast? Somewhere between the abandoned lands of demons and the domains of humans lies a village of exiled ones. Revaj tried to move his leg and said that he was now completely healthy, and Dial said that he was very happy to hear this. Revaj smiled and thanked him for looking after him, adding that he would like to be born with better health in his next life. Dial said that he wished he had a more noble origin, then he would buy himself a title and boss around all his servants. The boy laughed and said that such a dream would not come true even in the next life, after which he turned to Kimchi and said that it was time for them to return to the kingdom. Should he join them too? He thought for a second and answered that he didn't know. As he had already said, he didn't even remember who he used to be. He had never even been in human lands before. When he first came to the village, the people looked at him unwelcomingly. He didn't even know if they could accept someone like him. They looked at him thoughtfully, and after a few seconds, Raivaj smiled and advised him to change his clothes, but instead, he simply pulled his cloak over himself, and they left the hut, saying that it seemed he would never take off this strange outfit. He probably loved it too much. In fact, Kimchi really wanted to take off these clothes, and he looked down sadly, thinking that he couldn't do it, as if these clothes and his body were one. Raivaj, meanwhile, approached the man and thanked him for his kindness. After all, he considers it unfair that they, the descendants of the exiled, are forced to live in such a place. When he returns to the kingdom, we will definitely tell others his story. Kimchi glanced at him and thought that he was an aristocrat who had come by order of the king to explore the surroundings of the demon lands. He was a good man, without unnecessary pomposity, and he had good manners. And because of this, he asked himself, what kind of person was he? He imagined himself chopping down monsters and thought that if he followed the guiding hand, he would have to cause bloodshed again. Was he capable of anything other than murder? Meanwhile, the demon farmers discovered a sprout in the field. They were overjoyed and reported it to everyone around, after which the generals themselves came to see it and admiringly declared that they had succeeded. Flute went to Asura. She joyfully waved her hands and said that the sprout had sprouted, and he exclaimed in displeasure, "So what now?" Kratos came to the field and told the agricultural corps to listen to him carefully. Their next step was to begin hilling. He gave the brilliant commander-in-chief Hartok the floor, and he explained everything to them. Hilling is the covering of the lower part of the stem with soil. This is necessary to protect the tubers from exposure to sunlight. Under their influence, the color can change, the taste can deteriorate, even dried potatoes can become poisonous. Kratos confirmed his words and loudly applauded him, which he was very happy about, then looked at the sky to check today's weather. He spent 200 points to gain the weather forecast skill. The bloody eye opened in him, and to activate it, he must stare at an object without blinking for 200 seconds, but it was terribly difficult. He kept his eyes open, despite the fact that they had already dried, and tears continued to flow down his face. Seeing the Demon King crying, the farmers decided that he was also glad that the sprout had sprouted, and finally the system reported that he could see the future thanks to the bloody eye skill. For the next 6 hours, the weather will be mostly clear and dry. Humidifying the air is recommended. Kratos gave his dragon a treat and said that the blade winds would not come today either, so he could rest. After this, Zephyros approached him with urgent news. A servant of the second lord of the Planus fortress had arrived. Kratos went to the castle to meet him. The assistant of the second lord of Planus fortress, Lafloa, knelt before the Demon King and greeted him, then reported that after receiving the order to halt the military offensive and a message about farming, the third lord of Raster fortress launched a full-scale attack on them. He said that the Demon King had become weak, so he would become the new king. Kratos clutched his head and thought that these demons were all the same. Zephyros noted that if the third lord subjugated the second lord and united with him, it would be difficult for them to deal with both. He remained silent and thought that he knew this. Even though they were low in level, they would outnumber them. This meant that before the second lord of the fortress surrendered, he needed to hurry and defeat the third lord. But he couldn't simply abandon fieldwork for so long. The second lord of the fortress was attacked in the swamps of decay, located at the foot of the Cliff of the Dead. Compared to the game and reality, the map here is 10 times larger, so those lands are incredibly far away. It could be reached via the abandoned well, which in the game was responsible for temporary buffs and movement. But the well from the basement of the Demon King's castle doesn't work either. And how is he supposed to juggle war and farming at the same time? At that moment, he realized he had nothing to worry about, because he was the Demon King. The final boss doesn't run after anyone himself. He smiled broadly at these thoughts and set about executing his plan. Sergei sheepishly said that she wasn't going to fight in the king's place, but she still agreed to this idea, and Baal was ready to do whatever the king ordered. And so, 2 of the 4 generals entered the battle. Although they have poor intelligence and know nothing about farming, they have a powerful army with them. And since they are going through the final boss's region, there is a shortcut that will allow them to reach the swamps of decay faster. While they were engaging in battle, Kratos went to the fields and released a genius sprayer into the sky, thinking that if he and Hartok devoted all their efforts to growing potatoes, everything would be fine. Meanwhile, the castle of the second lord of the fortress was ablaze. Planus found himself on his knees before his enemy and asked how he dared disobey the king's orders and stage a coup. Raster, the third lord of the fortress, approached him and noted that, as he had said, it was a coup, but he should not misunderstand, and for him this choice was inevitable. After all, such a halt in the offensive is a direct path to their downfall. Planus exclaimed, "Wasn't that in the Demon King's message? This way they can make their lands fertile, and they will live in satiety without attacking people." Raster exclaimed that that was not the problem at all. The history and pride of demons lies in how bravely they fight. He swung his club and was about to strike, but someone's axe knocked it out of his hands. He immediately turned around and saw 2 of the 4 generals heading toward him. Sergei told him he was right, They were natural-born warriors. They enjoyed battle. They rejoiced in death. Since when did they change, and why did they become like this? At that moment, Flute excitedly ran home. She called her father to the field, and when they arrived there, they saw greenery and beautiful flowers. Sergei said that now they themselves don't know why they are like this, but they feel even more pride in not killing anyone and saving others. At that moment, everyone burst into tears, looking at the fruits of their hard work, and began running around the field, rejoicing and hugging. Flute joyfully ran up to the Demon King and said that it was very beautiful there. She had never seen anything like it in her life. He lowered his gaze and remained silent, while Sergei attacked Raster and began slashing at him with her swords. And Bale snuck up behind him and grabbed him. He could no longer resist, and the demoness could strike him unhindered. Kratos told the girl that there were too many flowers in bloom, and Raster asked them to stop, exclaiming, "Who said that killing isn't something to be proud of?" She had said that people should be spared. So why were her words different from her actions? Sergei said that was true, of course, but sometimes, to survive, you have to kill. She continued to strike, and he cried out in pain, exclaiming that he didn't understand what she was talking about. Kratos, meanwhile, mercilessly ordered them to cut down all the useless flowers, and they stared at him in shock. Asura screamed hysterically and said he was so cruel he would never forgive him, and Hartok laughed and remarked that even in the face of such a landscape, he was merciless. After all, he was the Demon King. After that, he waved his hand and asked the farmers, "Why are they standing? Let them go and cut these flowers right now." Asurat screamed loudly and began insulting him, and the demons set to work. They looked with tears in their eyes at these beautiful flowers that had just grown and had not yet had time to experience the world, and they were told to cut them. One of the demons burst into tears and told the commander-in-chief that he could not do this. They had grown them. For the first time in their lands, something so beautiful had bloomed. Hartok, with an inscrutable expression, said that if they left everything as it was, the nutrients from the sunlight would go to the formation of flowers and seeds. The Demon King's grand plan is to focus all his energy on growing potatoes. The demons were forced to obey his words, and with tears in their eyes, they began to tear up the flowers. Meanwhile, Kratos burst into loud laughter and shouted that he could hear the sound of potatoes growing even from here. His words only confirmed that the Demon King delighted in destruction. Soon 2 generals returned from the battlefield and brought the captured Raster back to their king. Kratos asked why he had rebelled. Even the first lord of the fortress had fallen, so what could he do? Raster looked up at him and asked him to simply kill him. A demon who has lost honor in battle is as good as dead. Kratos exclaimed that he had asked for it himself, then struck him with lightning, causing him to let out a piercing scream. Then he laughed and said that his body was a shell, so such attacks were like a mosquito bite for him. Kratos pointed out that he was right. He hadn't really dealt any damage, but he had a better idea. That's how the 3rd lightning rod appeared, and Kratos immediately started hitting him with lightning bolts, causing him to scream and ask him to just kill him. After that, the Demon King pointed at Asurat and asked someone to come and untie the 1st lightning rod. He hadn't been handling his attacks well lately, so it was time for him to retire. The demon was very surprised, and as soon as the ropes fell from his body and he was already lying on the ground, Flute ran up to him and called out to him worriedly. But hearing his evil laughter, she stopped. He looked up at her and grinned widely, asking, was she the one who was always teasing him? First, he would devour her, and then Kratos. Hearing this, she was very frightened, and he pounced on her. But his legs were so weak that he fell face down in front of her and let out a heavy sigh. He thought that this was all because he had not walked on his legs for so long, and Baal noticed that he had regressed to an infant. He looked at him with displeasure and exclaimed, why did he suddenly start throwing around such intricate words? Had he gone crazy? Baal immediately picked him up and he indignantly exclaimed, what was he doing? Let him not carry him around like a princess. After this, the demon tied him to himself like a baby and said that this was the order of the Demon King. Let him sit like this for now. Asurat's face turned completely red with shame, and he closed his eyes, thinking that he would never forget this disgrace. After that, he was carried away, and Kratos thought he was a little worried that he would cause a commotion here. But before that, he used the Bloody Eye skill and decided to let him go, knowing that he would not be able to move for another 6 hours. He waved his hand and ordered the farmers to speed up, as the harvest was just around the corner. Flowers were removed in the blink of an eye with the Sergei high-speed lawnmower, and with the Hartok, watering the field would be a breeze. There were not many dried potatoes left, and with this, the farmers' salaries were gradually decreasing. Even if the demons ate less and got used to hunger, he could see how exhausted they were. Adults and children continued to pick flowers, after which the 2nd lord of the fortress, Planus, approached the Demon King to thank him for saving them. He bowed to him in a respectful gesture, and Kratos looked at him in bewilderment, asking if he really came to thank him. Planus remained silent, unsure of what to say, and then the Demon King's face twisted into an angry grimace, and he nervously wondered why he was suddenly angry. Kratos was now very angry that he had come to him empty-handed. Hadn't he heard that one should come with a bottle of sparkling wine or ginseng? Planus became very agitated and said that together with the third lord, they would gather their subordinates and dispatch workers here. The Demon King's rage immediately subsided, and he thought that they didn't even have anything to eat. He was too accustomed to the Korean mentality. He glanced at the farmer and wondered if the potatoes would really grow. They needed to quickly harvest the fruit, dry it, and store it. He wanted to see his workers well-fed and happy. He thoughtfully rubbed his chin and wondered why he'd even decided to take up farming in the first place. Planus distracted him from his thoughts, awkwardly saying that in that case, he'd quickly reorganize the army and then left. Kratos watched him go and thought that this guy was a low-level boss with no special skills. He demonstrated incredible loyalty to Kratos, declaring that strength lies in truth. Well, he's a plant after all. Maybe he could somehow help with farming too? Meanwhile, Planus walked across the field, feeling how fertile the soil was. It's full of nutrients he'd never felt in the swamps of decay. Ever since he was just a sapling, he hadn't seen anything edible in their lands. He reached the cliffs of the dead, jumped down, and clung to a rock with the thought that if he could grow in this soil, he could become stronger, and then he would become the next Demon King. Clinging to the rock, he sent down roots all the way to the field and began to wait. Time passed, and one fine morning, Kratos was doing his usual demonic exercises. He waved his arms in every possible way, and the demons imitated him, keeping the pace, and then he began to squat. These demons were good for nothing before, but now, they follow his orders precisely. That's what demonic power means. Even when he gives sudden orders, they cope. He ordered them to roll left and then right, and thought that to work on the farm, you need to be at least a little physically developed, but now they can manage without him. Bale ran up to him and said they had big problems. All the potato tops had turned yellow. Hearing this, Kratos became agitated. Meanwhile, the three generals were examining the potato fields with annoyance. Zephyros asked if they had overdone it. Sergei looked down in disappointment, and Hartok said that even he didn't know what to do about it. Maybe there wasn't enough wind or water. He clicked his tongue in annoyance and thought, what else should one expect from agriculture? This is complete idiocy. MC arrived, and Zephyros immediately asked him what had happened to the potato field, but he ignored him and crouched down next to the bed. After that, he pulled the potatoes out of the soil, and Hartok, seeing a multitude of tubers, was very surprised and thought that the color was faded. But they were so big, there were twice as many of them as the first batch. Kratos smiled and said that the potato tubers had awakened. They grow, sucking all the nutrients from the leaves to become even larger. He turned to the demons and thanked them all for their work. They were able to grow potatoes. Hearing this, they sighed with relief, and some even burst into tears of joy. Night fell. Kratos went to his chambers, but he couldn't fall asleep. All his thoughts were occupied with today's event. They were able to grow them. He immediately remembered how tomatoes finally appeared on the branch, and his grandmother said with a smile that it was he who grew them. But then came the day when she was taken away in an ambulance. He was very upset, screaming, reaching out to her. He rolled over on his side and decided to throw these useless memories aside and thought that with his personality type, he shouldn't give in to such sentimentality. Soon they would be able to gorge themselves on potatoes to the point of bursting, but it was too early to relax. If they only eat potatoes, some disease will strike them, and they will all die, just like during the Great Famine in Ireland. He is simply solving urgent problems with potatoes, but he needs to get seeds for other crops as quickly as possible. Suddenly, the castle began to shake, and he jumped up in fear, thinking that the building was collapsing. At that moment, cracks appeared in the floor, and then a huge branch grew out of it, breaking everything around. Kratos managed to jump aside in time. He landed nearby and exclaimed, "What the hell is that?" Meanwhile, Flute noticed that the potatoes were quickly starting to wither. But since the king had said that the potatoes were growing, and that was why the leaves were dying, she didn't pay any attention to it at first. But when the leaves finally turned black and fell off, she realized something was wrong and dug up the bed, but there were no tubers inside. She stared in shock at the dead plants, then burst into tears and ran, deciding to quickly tell the adults everything. And at that moment, there was a crash. She looked up with tear-stained eyes and saw how the entire castle was enveloped in huge thick branches. Meanwhile, Planus grabbed the Demon King and laughed loudly, saying that he was like a pathetic bug. Kratos was very surprised when he realized who he was, and he said that he was a potato field full of nutrients, created by the Demon King. It was thanks to him that he grew up like this. What he heard shocked Kratos. He looked at the field of dead potatoes and clenched his teeth in rage, after which he cursed loudly and shouted, "What did he do with their food?" Planus grinned and asked, "Is he angry? What can he do to him?" His roots pulled the Demon King to the side, hit the rock with all his strength, causing blood to spray from his mouth. Meanwhile, Hartok evacuated the demons, and Bale declared that he would come to the king's defense. The other generals began to restrain him and asked if he had gone mad. The Demon King could not be destroyed, but they could easily be. Bale exclaimed that this was not so at all. The Demon King was weak. He realized this when he picked him up. He was very weak. Meanwhile, the castle collapsed. Planus grew to colossal size, and Kratos fell into the abyss. Seeing the huge plant, The demons looked at it in shock and realized that it was Planus. He ordered them to listen to him carefully and announced that the demon king Kratos was dead. These words sounded like thunder to them. They all froze and stared at him in shock, after which he told them to remember the old ways of the demons. Their power comes from strength. From now on, he is their king. So let them bow before his absolute power. Meanwhile, Hartok understood everything. Planus had absorbed the nutrients from the soil, and after Kratos' death, it became the strongest in these lands. He knelt, thinking that the demons would follow the strongest, after which the other generals were forced to submit. Only Zephyros remained standing, now looking at them with a shocked look. Asura asked why he was hesitating. Let him show him respect. Zephyros gritted his teeth. He really didn't want to do this, but his life depended on it. Overcoming his composure, he knelt before the new demon king and burst into tears. Meanwhile, MC was lost in his memories. He remembered how he and his mother went to the playground, and she invited him to play hide and seek. He immediately realized that this was the day and became nervous. His mother smiled slightly and told him to close his eyes, count to 10, and then look for her. While the boy was counting, he was constantly watching him, and when he finally counted to 10, he opened his eyes and went looking for her. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't find her, and starting to worry, he called her loudly and asked her to come out. Let her come out when he counted to 10. He didn't wait for her answer, but he still believed in the best and started counting, while MC, meanwhile, was holding back tears. The boy counted to 10, his mother didn't show up, and he began to call out for her piercingly, and then he couldn't hold back a tear, and the little boy burst into loud sobs, still calling for her. Suddenly, the system called him by his real name and ordered him to come to his senses, after which he opened his eyes and thought, was his name written in the test window? It was so dark here that he couldn't understand where he was and asked the system about it, and it told him to move. If he moved, he could survive. He tried to do anything and realized that the quantum leap was lagging. He couldn't move at all. There wasn't even room to turn around. He felt like he could move his arm, and thought that if he could move even a little, he could dig himself out. To keep himself awake, he began counting and digging at the same time, applying all his effort. While he was trying to get out, Planus began to raid his lands and asked the advisor to come closer. Zephyros greeted the new demon king with respect, and he ordered him to record this significant first step in detail. Demons will invade human lands and rule over them. They will grow and eat them. The 4 generals felt uneasy. They all now thought that this was the starting point, but they will have fun. They will be able to fight and kill to their heart's content. Demons have lived like this for a long time. Only this way can they eat their fill. However, for some reason, this made everyone very angry. Meanwhile, Kratos continued counting, his strength dwindling, and with it his oxygen, he began to suffocate. Meanwhile, Planus ordered the demons to take up arms and rush into battle, and Zephyros decided it was time to act. He told the king that it would be difficult for them to go into battle. Planus looked at him with displeasure, and the 4 generals grew nervous. Zephyros said that the demons currently had only a few potatoes left to eat, too little for a military campaign. Planus glared at him, then told him he was such an idiot. They had plenty of food. He extended his roots toward the farmers and grabbed Flute, causing her father to immediately rush to her side and call out worriedly. Asura watched in fear as Planus lifted the girl, after which he called the little demoness weak and worthless, asking if such creatures were not suitable as food. Flute tearfully exclaimed that they were no longer like that. They could survive without eating each other. It was all thanks to Lord Kratos, their true king. Planus glared at her, then loosened his grip, and she fell. Meanwhile, Kratos was completely weakened. He felt his heart stop and thought that if he died, they would probably start to starve. To bring himself back to his senses, he used the blood shock, and an electric current pierced his entire body, filling him with strength. He couldn't allow anyone to starve, and so he began counting again and digging his way upward with all his might. Meanwhile, Asura caught Flute, preventing her from breaking, and Kratos shocked himself as soon as his strength ran out, and he felt his heart stop. It was hard for him, very hard. But he continued digging the earth and thought, how much longer should he do this? Is he at least moving in the right direction? Is he at least doing what he can now? After these thoughts, he stopped and plunged into thought, while the generals nervously watched Asura. He stood confidently before the self-proclaimed demon king, and Flute looked at him in surprise. Planus asked with displeasure, have you completely lost your mind? Asura looked at him confidently, but realizing how this could end, he became very nervous and began to justify himself, claiming it was his food. To prove his point, he excitedly began gnawing on her hair and said he'd had his eye on her for a while, so he needed to eat her while she was still fresh. Planus swung a branch and hit him with such force that he was thrown several meters away and rolled on the ground, unable to get up. Zephyros looked at him worriedly, and Planus ordered them to prepare for war. Gathering all his resolve, Zephyros declared that they had no compelling reason to start a war. Planus wanted to punish him for his disobedience, but Baal intervened. He cut off the branch he had directed at the advisor and held him close, saying that the demon king had entrusted the job to Zephyros. If he died, they wouldn't be able to count the potatoes. Planus asked if they were planning a rebellion. Hartok told the Lord they wouldn't allow it, but he thought that instead of starting a war, they should give the order to focus on farming, as the previous king had done. Sergei also objected, saying that the previous king had shown them a path where no one dies. Why start a war if there was another option? Planus became extremely angry and called them mere small insects, after which he released his roots and shouted that he had the strength and all authority. Hartok said that was not true at all. Only the rightful ruler could have power. The demonic generals armed themselves and prepared for battle, and the farmers shouted that their king was Lord Kratos. He should get out of their potato fields immediately. In response, Planus furiously released all his branches at them, but Hartok waved his hand and raised a misty barrier above them, protecting them. Meanwhile, Sergei climbed into Baal's arms, and he threw her high up, bringing her close to the branches, and immediately began chopping them down. When she reached Planus's face, she pointed her swords at him and screamed that she would gouge out his eyes first, but she was immediately struck by a huge branch and thrown back. Baal was immobilized, his arms and legs bound by the branches, and Hartok was pinned down. Planus cried out in rage, "How dare they challenge the Demon King? He will kill them all. Death will open their eyes, and they will see that he is more powerful than Kratos." His branches began to rage, squeezing the 4 generals as tightly as they could, and he cried out, "They say that Kratos is their king? That weakling, who couldn't even stand up to him. And where is he now? What's so good about this Kratos?" He intended to swat Zephyros, who wanted to run away with the girl, but Kratos appeared. He said he didn't value himself at all, and Planus's gaze immediately fell on him. MC clenched his bloodied fist, stopping a branch rushing toward his assistant with one blow, and then it tore apart. Planus uttered his name in rage, and Zephyros called out to the king in surprise, and the system reported that he had gained new systems and skills while on the brink of life and death. He activated the nutrient concentration skill. Just 10 minutes ago he had stopped digging because it was too hard for him, and memories of his life with his grandmother flooded him again. They lived in poverty, and that day his grandmother was cleaning seeds and asked what he said. He hung his head dejectedly and repeated that it was too hard. Why live like this at all if it's so difficult? His grandmother looked at him thoughtfully, choosing her words, after which she said that it was all because he was a seed. He looked at her with confusion, and she said that all living things are seeds. To become a sprout, you must diligently break through the earth. If others see the sprout and also gain strength, then seeds will sprout everywhere. And then, one day, everything around will turn green. He got angry and ordered her to stop talking in metaphors. Then why did his dad do nothing but work and then die if he was such a good person? Why did his mother abandon him? Maybe he is a rotten seed? Let her not talk nonsense. He, like his mother, will live and think only of himself. He will become successful and ensure that only he lives well and eats his fill. Soon his grandmother was taken away in an ambulance, but before leaving, she told him that they are all seeds. Remembering this, he shocked himself again through clenched teeth and began to claw his way upward. The system reported that he had survived the suffering of death and reincarnation. His will and spirit, having gone beyond, opened a new system. The mana seed system was now unlocked. He looked at the system window in confusion, wondering if this was even in the game. It informed him that as a reward for 3 successful revivals, starting at level 3, he would receive mana seeds. These seeds increase stats by a certain multiplier. His mana seeds were currently level 3, with a boost factor of 1.3. He thought that even though all abilities were boosted by 30%, he still wouldn't be able to escape from here. Then the system informed him of the mana seed system's additional skill, Nutrient Focus. He could focus all his abilities on a single stat, and the effects did for 10 minutes. This ability could be used once per day. His eyes immediately widened. Now all his stats were at 30%, and when he activated the mana seeds, they became 39. He used the concentration on nutrients and invested points in strength, which caused it to increase to 98%, and then again, so his strength became 155%. Now he could easily get out of the ground, putting all his strength. While Planus was rampaging, Kratos came to the surface, stopped the murder of his advisor, and he asked in shock, "So he survived?" MC called him an idiot and asked why he asked if it was obvious. Seeing him, all the other demons were very happy. Finally, their king returned. They shouted their favorite cry, and then Tabon rushed to his father. He burst into tears of happiness and began to rub his cheek against him. Meanwhile, the 4 generals sighed with relief, but now Planus's power was too great, so they doubted the king would be able to win. Planus said that on the contrary, it was even better that way. Here and now, he would kill him and all his subordinates. He smiled in response and confidently said that he would not do that. After all, he couldn't even kill one. He thought that no matter how huge he was, in the end, he could only act according to the game scripts. If he took into account that the attack range was greater than in the game, then he would be able to dodge it as much as he wanted. He also had the enormous power of a united agricultural corps. He ordered the farmers to stand behind him, and they began to do exercises. They immediately lined up behind him, and when a huge branch appeared above them, he ordered them to jump to the left. They successfully dodged the blow, and then the branch hit again, and this time they jumped to the right. Planus tried another attack, but they dodged this time too, getting into a plank. The huge branches hit again. He ordered them to roll to the left until they reached a safe place, after which he told them to jump and jump back. They successfully dodged Planus's attack again, and he exclaimed indignantly, "How is this possible? Why can't he hit them?" Meanwhile, Kratos thought that there should be a long pause after this attack. He ordered the farmers to spin around, then pointed at Planus with a haughty smirk and ordered them to use a taunt move. Planus became extremely angry. He growled loudly, and then the branches began to rage. MC thought he had succeeded. A glowing pattern appeared. If they had followed the rules of the game so far, this time they would break the rules of the real world. He ordered T-Bong to act, and he flew forward, then took a deep breath and used a cold breath. A huge stream of frost hit Planus's face, freezing several branches, and MC thought that since he had tremendous physical strength now, there was no point in endlessly hitting him. After all, he was just a plant. If they finished him off with intense cold, his volume would increase and his flesh would be torn apart. When T-Bomb covered most of his body in ice, Kratos grinned, and just as Planus was about to strike, his branches snapped and broke easily. MC grinned widely and shouted that he had bragged about his size, but ended up destroying himself. T-Bomb returned to his father and clung to his hand for a rest. The time for the final blow arrived. Kratos handed the dragon to his advisor, then crouched, gathered more strength in his legs, and leaped high into the air, preparing to attack Planus. He cursed at the hole in Planus's chest, thinking it was another weak spot in the trees, a hollow. Approaching, he struck the hollow with all his might, causing a loud crunch and the tree to begin to crumble. Planus screamed loudly, feeling the pain, while everyone thought the Demon King had won. The system reported that the time limit for using the nutrient concentration skill had been exceeded, and as he fell, Planus slowly disintegrated and screamed loudly. Finally, the strength left his body. He closed his eyes, and when his face disappeared, Zephyros thought he was dead. Planus froze in place. MC fell nearby and thought it was strange. In the game, his body simply crumbled and disappeared. But why was he still here? Noticing something, he tensed. Small roots emerged from the ground, from which a new body of Planus then grew. Kratos became very nervous. He couldn't even move, and the enemy was full of strength again. The farmers gritted their teeth, afraid of what would happen next, and Planus said that he had absorbed a lot of nutrients. Although he almost died, he concentrated his strength and created another body. He is a seed that fell into a swamp full of poison. He grew into a cursed sprout. But now, having received the power of the Demon King, he will drown the entire world in poison. He approached Kratos and, waving his hand, commanded him to die. And at that moment, Baal, with a loud roar, pounced on the enemy with his axe. He drove the blade into his neck, but failed to cut, and Planus swung his hand, throwing him away. A second later, Sergi attacked him, plunging all 6 of her swords into his neck, but was immediately struck in the chest, and then Hartok appeared. He struck him in the neck with all his might, but it was still not enough, and the enemy grabbed him by the head and slammed him to the ground. At that moment, another cut appeared on his neck, made by Asura. He shouted "Bumper Harvest," and then swung his hand, delivering the final fatal blow. Planus was decapitated, but Kratos lived. The enemy's body froze, this time disintegrating, which meant that he was definitely dead. All the branches that remained of him also disintegrated into small glowing particles and began to slowly descend under the demon's gaze. MC thought that this idiot got what he deserved, after which the demon generals stood up and Zephyros said that as for treason, he was registering the victory of the Demon King. Hartok pursed his lips, then victoriously punched the air and shouted the name of their king, and everyone else followed suit. They began to rejoice, but Kratos had no time for that now. He loudly ordered them to stop, and everyone immediately fell silent. He looked at the devastated potato field, then his gaze fell on a withered leaf, and he realized that the entire field was destroyed. He would have to grow everything from scratch, and they would have to starve again. And after all this mess, they were supposed to go back to farming? He gritted his teeth and thought that he couldn't make them work again. The 4 generals stood silently, awaiting his further words, and the small glowing particles that remained after Planus finally reached the ground, and when one of them fell on a leaf, it immediately turned green. Once upon a time, when Zephyros was still small, he sat in a cage among demons that were raised for food. News reached them from the chief demon breeder that a few days ago the king had changed, but they were not happy. No matter who the king was, they were still being raised for slaughter. At that moment, the executioner appeared. He opened the door, and when he entered, everyone began to scatter and press against the walls, afraid that he would choose one of them. Only Zephyros remained sitting, and this is how he attracted the executioner's attention. He grabbed the boy, lifted him off the floor, but his face was still expressionless. Then he decided to chop at him with his sword, but Kratos stopped him. He grabbed the executioner by the head and executed him, saving the boy. His head flew out of the prison cell, after which MC approached the child and asked why he didn't beg for mercy. Being scared, he replied that he wasn't afraid. On the contrary, he sighed with relief. No matter how much adversity he endured, a feeding demon has no chance of survival. Therefore, the best he can do is shorten the time he spends in fear, awaiting his death. Kratos really liked his words. He smirked and noted that he was not like everyone else. Let him follow him. He will become the new advisor of the demonic people. He felt sorry for letting someone like him become meat. For now, they will have to continue to feed on other demons. But one day, he, the new king, will put an end to this tragedy of eating their own kind. Now Zephyros looked at the dejected king and remembered that moment from his childhood. Having made up his mind, he turned to the field, took a hoe and began to plow the soil under the gaze of the other generals. Hartok thought for a moment, watching him, then turned to the agricultural corps and asked what they were standing there for. Tell them to level the land and build beds quickly. They immediately armed themselves with tools and enthusiastically ran to the field, and MC, hearing this, turned around in surprise. Despite the fact that all the fruits of their hard work were destroyed, they did not give in to despair and began working with renewed vigor, singing songs. Watching them, Kratos himself gained strength, then stood up and began issuing commands. The first squad was to find at least one spot where the potatoes had survived, and the second squad was to take hoes and form lines. Sergei would cut the remaining potatoes for sowing, and Zephyros would polish her swords. Hartok would take command of the first squad, and Asura would bring the tools he had mentioned. He spread his arms wide and shouted, "Bumper harvest," and all the demons repeated it in chorus. After that, the demons tied themselves to a long stick and stuck their hoes into the ground, and Baal, as the main strongman, pulled a kind of plow behind him, holding the rope in his teeth. So they plowed the field very quickly, and MC thought that for a second he forgot that this is the essence of agriculture. Natural disasters, pests, price and climate changes. They are losing, fighting all these enemies. They fall and start digging the earth again, because this is a war for food and life. At that moment, Flute noticed the only surviving sprout and joyfully rushed to it. Lightning Rod number 3, half buried in the ground, begged for mercy. She paid no attention to him at all, and tried to pull the sprout out, but she did not have enough strength. Asurat came to her aid. He took the sprout and told her to grip it tighter. On the count of 3, they pulled out the sprout together, and when they saw what had been hidden underground all this time, they were very surprised. They pulled out many huge tubers, several of which fell right on Raster's head and hit him. Asurat was very surprised, and Flute was happy. She immediately ran to Kratos, and when she showed him this very large potato, he was very surprised. He took it and asked, "Isn't this really a potato? Where did she get that?" She told him that she pulled out a sprout there, and a whole pile of potatoes came out. He remembered something and understood. If you kill Planus in the game, a cutscene starts in which a small patch of grass appears in place of the body. This means that all of its nutrients have been absorbed back into the soil, and now Planus has become hundreds of times larger, or even 1,000 times. He immediately called the agricultural corps and ordered them to drop everything and start digging deeper into the ground. They followed his instructions and discovered a huge potato, after which they joyfully declared that the field hadn't been destroyed. There were mountains of giant potatoes everywhere. As reports of potato discoveries increased, MC became even more amazed. All the demons were now overjoyed. Their hard work had not been in vain. Zephyros turned to the king and asked, "Isn't this a bumper harvest?" He confirmed this, and thought with a smile that it was such a relief. He burst into tears of happiness, because now they could all eat their fill. Soon they built a temporary castle for the demon king, and Kratos sat on his majestic throne to summarize the situation with the abandoned lands. First, the region of the first castle. Saruthul, the lord of the first star zone, rebelled but was stopped. The heart of the ice dragon stopped and all his servants disappeared. Now it is completely empty and there is no one there. The second star zone. When the head of the zone, Planus, died, all his servants entered a state of confusion. The head of the third zone, Raster, is now being used as a lightning rod. Should he punish him and his servants for the rebellion? The fourth star region is the zone of the snake-like man Tartu. In the game, he proved himself to be very loyal. With the help of the remnants of the army of the second star zone, they can easily defeat the inhabitants of the fourth zone. But he shouldn't attack him out of the blue, because before he can create an army, he needs to feed a bunch of demons and then a new harvest. Zephyros came to him and informed him that, as he ordered, they had started harvesting dried potatoes. He praised him and asked him to distribute food coupons, after which a small demon flew in through the window and informed the king that he had transmitted the order to put all zones on alert. He asked, did they just listen? Now he can't trust them. The demon answered him that the fourth star zone didn't listen, and he exclaimed in displeasure, why weren't they listening to him again? The demon confusedly answered him that they hadn't said anything special, and he asked in displeasure, did he return without even asking them what the reason was? The demon started mumbling something, Then Kratos couldn't hold back and grabbed him by the wings, exclaiming, "What's wrong with Demon's intelligence? He wants to know why the 4th Star Zone manager didn't listen to him." He excitedly told him that there were only a few servants left in the 4th Star Zone. It was completely empty. MC asked, "Was he the one who asked those servants?" He told him that it wasn't so, and he asked, "Does that mean he has no idea why it was empty?" He told him that it wasn't so, and MC was furious, thinking that this was irritating him so much. It was like talking to a useless manager from management. Zephyros wrote something down in his notebook and said that although he had become kinder, he was still the Demon King. His face looked creepy. Even if 10,000 years passed, there would be no one more terrible than Kratos. He cursed loudly and exclaimed, what was he suggesting they do now? Just leave everything as is? Zephyros decided to talk to this demon himself and calmly asked what the servants told him. Where was the 4th Star Zone manager? Bursting into tears, he told him that he attacked the human lands. They said he went to collect their bodies to compost. MC was speechless for a second after hearing this, and then, in shock, he thought, what did he just say? According to the game's plot, the ancient paladin is supposed to awaken at this very moment. When the demon invasion begins, he will move in to destroy them. This means that if they don't attack, the paladin won't attack them either. A lot of time has passed, but since the paladin, that is, aged Kimchi, hasn't appeared yet, it means his assumptions are correct. However, if the head of the 4th zone attacks the people, then aged Kimchi will come to them and destroy all the demons. These thoughts made him very anxious. He jumped up from his place, and Zephyros asked where he was going. He answered that he would stop the head of the 4th zone, and he asked, what about the army? Kratos exclaimed that it was faster to go alone, and thought that after defeating Planus, his mana seeds had reached level 4. He immediately used the nutrient concentration skill and invested everything into agility, increasing his speed. He ran toward the human lands and thought he would use anything to get there faster. Abandoned demon lands. Not far from here is the Tower of Life, the Paladin's grave. The desolate lands, where aged Kimchi meets Revaj and his people, and also the village of exiles, where he stopped for a while. If you go a little further from that place, you can find the border between the demon and human lands, and it's called Magrat Fortress. A guard at the very top of the fortress looked through a spyglass and saw Azrahan's messenger approaching the city, and immediately informed everyone around him. He looked around and exclaimed, where have his soldiers gone? With him is only that ugly servant and companion, whom he sees for the first time. The fortress commander, Volkos, and several guards descended, and he greeted Revaj, noting that he had come a long way. What had happened to the soldiers who accompanied him? He looked away and regretfully informed him that they had encountered monsters along the way and hadn't been able to even get close to the demon lands. And that's how it had all happened. Volkos closed his eyes and said that it was the king's order to explore the demon lands. Such a mission is rare, but there are always casualties. They were all outstanding warriors. He opened the door and invited them inside to rest, for which they were grateful. Revaj and his servant passed through the gate, but Kimchi was stopped. Volkos said he hadn't given him permission to enter, and Revaj and Diol immediately turned to him, worried. Kimchi looked at the fortress commander with a look that made him feel uneasy, and Revaj told him they'd met this man in the abandoned lands. He'd saved him when he was wounded. Volkos asked if he'd forgotten. Only those who left these doors could enter. Diol smiled awkwardly and said it was just a small misunderstanding, then pulled out a few coins and quietly said they weren't asking him to let them in for free. For daring to offer the commander a bribe, he was immediately punched in the face, and the man screamed that he was a walking potato with an ugly face and soul. His children's children and their children's children would live the same way he had. Diol shed a tear at these words, and he pointed his sword at Kimchi and ordered him to immediately remove his cloak. If he saw anything suspicious, he would execute him on the spot. Revaj became very nervous, because there were certainly suspicious things under his cloak. Kimchi was in no hurry to carry out his order. He glanced at the servant he'd just slapped, then turned a menacing glare on him, causing him to flinch again. At that moment, someone blew a horn, alerting the others that they were coming. Turning around, the fortress commander saw an entire army of demons advancing on the fortress, led by the head of the 4th zone. The commander immediately ran to the fortress and ordered the guards to prepare for battle, while Kimchi looked at the demons in surprise and sensed something. A voice in his head whispered to him to kill them, and he lost control. MC, meanwhile, ran to the fortress as fast as he could, silently begging him not to attack, otherwise all the demons would die. The lizardmen rolled a huge log straight toward the gate. It slammed against the gate, and the archers on the wall shouted, "Fire! Shoot!" Arrows flew straight at the demons. One of them swung a special device, sending a stone hurtling forward. The archers began to fall from their positions, and the demons continued to batter the wall. At that moment, aged Kimchi lowered his gaze and thought, instinctively rushing into battle. Perhaps in his past 19 lives, he remembered how, time and again, he carried out assassinations at the behest of his mission, compelling him to fight again. If Sir Revaj hadn't pulled him out, he would have fought as if it were his destiny. He doesn't even know his true position. But now, Everyone here is shaking with fear. Isn't it worth fighting in a situation like this? The next second, the gates began to crack. The warriors standing guard fled in the opposite direction. One of them ran forward and shouted, "The castle gates! The gates are breaking!" The next second, the gates were broken. Demons with weapons ran forward. One of them shouted, "We must kill them all! Kill them and turn them into fertilizer." Volkos shouted for them to cut off the rear bridge. His subordinate wanted to object, but he shouted that they were going to die here anyway. Not a single demon could be allowed through the wall. The main gate was destroyed. They must cut off the bridge. The next second, a powerful explosion was heard. Raivaj said that he had just heard the sound of the bridge collapsing. Dial sat next to him, and with tears in his eyes, shouted, "Does that mean they're all going to die here?" He didn't even have time to get married. In response, he looked at him and told him not to be so sad, Dial. Even if he survived, he still would never have married. He thought, this man, in his next life, he'll definitely be born an aristocrat and make him work himself to death. Then, flying rocks reached them. They tried to shield their heads from the falling debris. A demon smashed the wall next to them, and the people watched in horror. Then the lizard grabbed a little girl. She began to cry and call for her mother. Her mother stretched out her arms and screamed. No! Raivaj wanted to run into battle, but Dial grabbed him. The next second, the demon was killed. Raivaj caught the girl and fell to the ground with her. Aged Kimchi flew up, looking down on all the chaos unfolding in this place. He noticed the lizard and then quickly landed in front of him. The lizard thought, "Clothes? What kind of clothes are these? Too strange." Then Aged Kimchi said that he didn't want to fight, they should retreat. The demon held his weapon in front of him and asked, what kind of ridiculous outfit is he even giving him orders? And if they refuse to retreat, what will he do? He remained silent and then declared that he will kill them all, starting with him. The next second, the demon swung his weapon and headed straight for Aged Kimchi, and he thought, in the end, it turned out he had no choice. He closed his eyes and thought, yes, since this is his destiny, he will accept it. Then he opened his eyes and realized that he is a demon slayer. At that moment, the demon king attacked the lizard, knocking the weapon from its paw. Aged Kimchi looked at this in surprise, then the lizard flew to the side. The protagonist looked at Aged Kimchi and said, "Aged Kimchi? Where did he come from?" The lizard cried out in surprise, "The Demon King." Then the protagonist added another blow to his face. He hit him again and screamed, "What an idiot! Disobedient! He's an idiot! Why did they attack? Why did they attack people?" He tried to answer, "My lord, he just..." The protagonist shouted at him to shut up, "Idiot! He must die." "They're peaceful," he says, "Huh? Farming, huh? They say they'll be like dead rats? That's what it means? Without even fighting. They're alive. They have food. So why? They do whatever they want. Why are they acting arbitrarily?" The protagonist thought, he's asking him to see this. At least this time he should be patient. He's asking him not to kill his demons. The next second, Aged Kimchi said, he knows him. The protagonist turned around in surprise and he asked, "Isn't he the Demon King Kratos?" He panicked and thought he would die first. The people present were surprised. Did he just say, "Demon King"? Did the Demon King himself come here? Are they talking about something? They were far away, inaudible. The protagonist turned around and asked, "Kratos? Is that the name of some kind of computer operating system?" Aged Kimchi said he wasn't asking because he didn't know, but because he was making sure for the last time. MC was thinking. He'd already noticed. He was already sure of everything. If he stood there like this, he'd definitely be killed. Right now, the best he could do was this move. The next second, he ran toward Aged Kimchi, then braced himself with his hands on the ground and thrust his horns into the ground, standing on his hands. The lizardmen were surprised. His opponent didn't know what to do. Was this the Demon King's new terrifying move? Aged Kimchi asked what he was doing. He replied that it was called bow down. This gesture signified immense gratitude and apology. The Demon King Kratos really isn't going to invade human territory. Those stupid lizards decided to act on their own, so he came to stop them. Aged Kimchi asked, does he think he'll believe a demon's words? The protagonist said he begs him to believe him. He'll apologize 10, even 100 times, until he breaks all his horns. The lizards were chatting, the terrifying pose of a bull digging the ground in anger. It's immediately obvious. This is the Demon King. The protagonist bowed again and thought, he looks so servile, but if he doesn't do this, all the demons will die. He's responsible for all the people. He remembered how he knelt before a guest, and the man laughed loudly and shouted, did he really kneel when he told him to? So he thought that was the end of it? He'd still give them a lower rating. So then MC begged for forgiveness. He would do everything to ensure this never happened again. He asked them to give him another chance. He thought that, for the sake of his people, he was ready to endure any humiliation. Aged Kimchi, watching him, thought, useless king of Kratos. He doesn't exist to be killed. He waved his scepter and thought that now he would do it and kill the rest of the demons. He had to kill him. He had already hit his head on the ground 10 times recently and took a break, and 10 more times. There was something familiar about it. 10 times. 10. Then he frowned and thought, his calling, always 10 times. He searched the demon lands 10 times every time. Even before falling into a trap, he waited precisely, counting to 10. And even where there were no enemies, he simply somersaulted 10 times. The protagonist said that he sincerely begged for forgiveness. He was begging for mercy. Aged Kimchi thought about it, and this tone of speech was completely unbecoming of the Demon King. Why did the pointing hand of summoning appear before him in the role of the Demon King? Then he ordered him to stop. The MC looked at him in surprise, and he told him to get out of his sight immediately. because he really wanted to kill him. The protagonist abruptly grabbed the lizardman onto his shoulder and shouted, "Thank you. He will never forget his mercy. The army of the 4th star zone. They must retreat." He thought for them to leave as quickly as possible. He shouted for them to retreat. The lizardmen wondered, what's wrong with him? How could this have happened? They didn't know. Well, since the Demon King said so. MC ran to the exit. The rest of the demons ran after him. The next second, the lizardman tore off from the protagonist's shoulder and shouted, "How dare he!" He charged at Aged Kimchi. The protagonist extended his hand forward and shouted, "No!" Aged Kimchi turned around and cut off both of the demon's arms with one blow. Their gazes met, and the protagonist thought, "Oh shit!" Aged Kimchi said he understood that it was his personal decision and not his intention. Then he turned around again and said, "But if he sees his horns in the human world again, then he will kill him." Then Ravage asked in surprise, "What happened to Aged Kimchi?" Diol said that he was worried when he suddenly disappeared. At that moment, Aged Kimchi approached them and said that they had to engage in a brief battle. Ravage was surprised, huh? Against those terrible demons? Volkos approached them and asked, did he defend his knighthood? He placed his hand on his chest and lowering his head said, "Sir, Aged Kimchi defeated the demon army in an instant. It was so magnificent that the others fell to their knees. Everyone saw it. He begs forgiveness for his rudeness." Ravage was surprised. Sir Aged Kimchi? He knew he was a strong man, but before he could finish speaking, Volkos shouted for all to hear. They must salute the aged Kimchi, who defended their fortress. The warriors shouted, "Glory!" Aged Kimchi lowered his gaze and thought that this was his 20th life. And for the first time, he had managed to escape a life full of murder. He had chosen the path of life. Some time passed. Abandoned lands, the 4th star zone, the wild lands of the storm. The protagonist walked forward, frowning and thinking, "Finally, I have arrived. It would take an eternity to bring an entire crowd here." Then he turned to the demon and, clenching his fist, shouted, "Now they must go home. They will die if they invade the human world again." One of the demons standing ahead said they were also simply going because Mr. Tartu ordered it. MC shouted that he didn't need excuses. They had to go home quickly, immediately. After that, he walked forward and thought, since this isn't a game, there are no bugs or shortcuts, so everything takes longer. I need to check on the potatoes, see how their little ones are growing. Then he looked to the side and thought, oh, the abandoned well. If only that worked, moving around wouldn't be so hard. Because there was a system responsible for buffing and teleportation. Just in case, he tried various methods, but in the end, nothing worked. He knelt down by the well and thought about teleporting, but that was a pipe dream because he wasn't alone. Suddenly, a glow appeared from the well, and the system announced that thanks to his meeting with the paladin, a new game system had been unlocked. Teleportation through the abandoned well was available to him. He let out a surprised cry as he began to be sucked in. The system reported that all the wells he'd encountered in this world had been activated. Where was he going now? He thought, hooray, that well in the basement of the Demon King's castle. Huh? It's broken? The system reported that the well was still there. He thought he got it. He had to go there. The system reported that he was going to the basement of the Demon King's castle. With a loud cry, he flew forward. Meanwhile, Asura stood on a pile of stones. He said that it was broken. Maybe they should just give up? Flute was on all fours not far from him, throwing stones in all directions and asking for at least one intact weapon to be here. Then she looked ahead in surprise and asked, huh? A bright glow appeared in front of her. Then the protagonist's head emerged from it. He emerged from the ground, screaming loudly. She looked at it in surprise and then fell to the ground. The protagonist's entire body shook. He closed his mouth and then emptied his stomach. Asura ran straight at him and jumped over Flute. The protagonist continued to empty his stomach, the contents pouring down on him. Then MC wiped his mouth and thought, how disgusting. Why can't he just teleport peacefully, like in the game? At that moment, Asura collapsed to the ground, clenching his teeth in irritation. Flute reached out to him with tears in her eyes, and the protagonist thought, well, if he can get here by vomiting, it's cheap. Since he's here, it's time to start growing royal potatoes. After a while, he approached the potato reserves and, folding his arms, said that he still found this incredible. Zephyros stood next to him and said, Mr. Hartok had also completed the mist purification. Then the protagonist picked up the potato and thought, what? Where did he get this bad feeling from? Zephyros looked at him in surprise, and the protagonist, enraged, said, damn it. He climbed up the mountain of potatoes, scattering them in all directions, shouting, no, and not here, not anywhere. Zephyros asked, my lord, is there a problem with the potatoes? He replied, all these royal potatoes have no eyes. He asked, and if there are no eyes, then won't sprouts appear? He noted that this was true. These potatoes were sterile. Sometime later, in the Demon King's temporary castle, MC, sitting on a chair, leaned his head on his hand and said, therefore, if you sow these royal potatoes, nothing will grow from them. Hartok added, since the potatoes have changed unnaturally, the mutation has taken away their reproductive function. Bale asked, will they not be able to eat the potatoes? Sergi looked at him and, folding her arms, said, they won't be able to plant these, you fool. If they eat all of this, that's the end. The protagonist said, they couldn't live on potatoes alone forever anyway. Potatoes are very vulnerable to disease, so if they got sick just once, it would be the end of all the potatoes. One day, they would have to plant something other than potatoes. Asurat looked at him and asked what exactly he was talking about. What else could grow in these lands besides potatoes? He replied, nothing. However, he knew a place where they could plant a lot of crops. Zephyros looked at him and wondered, could he really be talking about? Then the protagonist said, a place with a huge amount of agricultural seeds, the lands of the people. Baal shouted, invasion, conquest, just like in a war. Sergei shouted at him to wait. Fool. She turned around and added, the one who hates war the most is the Demon King. After this, MC, turning to Zephyros, told him to immediately go dry the royal potatoes. He should stay here to help Hartok with the agricultural core. And he, Sergei, Baal, and Asura will go and sell dried potatoes to the people. They'll buy seeds with the money, he thought. Aged Kimchi. The main thing is not to run into that idiot. And there's another way. Zephyros said going to the human world to sell dried potatoes is crazy. The protagonist asked if he could explain why he had to hear that. He replied, 3 of the 4 Star Lords, one of whom looks like a monster at first glance. A guy with a killer's face and an inhuman skin color. A pale, anorexic woman with big ears, resembling an octopus. If people see them, they'll pounce screaming. They're demons. Then Sergei grabbed his body with several hands, and he said, he didn't say anything bad. They should think about it soberly. Asurat drew his blade and said, completely sober. They're gonna finish him off right here. Baal shouted that Zephyros was right. They all look weird, he agreed. Asurat replied, that's not true, friend. He's a pretty standard demon. Hartok lowered his head and said he didn't think his self-perception was so warped. Compared to his noble appearance, they all looked the same. Asurat sighed and looking at him remarked, he, the old man, looks more like a zombie. Sergei put her hands at her sides and said, yeah, they all look like salted fish that were then fried. How funny they are. Asurat yelled at her to shut up. Hartok added, yeah, she looks the least human of all, an octopus. The next second, a fight broke out between them. MC, watching them, thought, they all have fragile egos and complexes about their appearance. How pathetic they sometimes look. Then he extended his hand forward and said, stop. He smiled wickedly and thought he should lighten the mood with a joke. He told them not to fight, girls. They should all equally not show themselves in public. He looked at their faces in surprise and wondered, why aren't they laughing? But judging by the fact that they calmed down, he immediately felt relieved. Well, that's great. Then he looked at Zephyros and asked, he did keep what he told him to take when they left Sorrowful Fortress, right? Zephyros said, oh right, is he talking about the shortcut? Then he took out several small creatures. Sergei came closer and asked, what are these? The protagonist grinned madly and said that they are called the elixir of transformation. If you eat this, you can transform from a demon into another creature. With this, you can change your appearance and go to human territory. She cried out in surprise. Eat this? He folded his arms and asked, does she think he'd just give it to them? Baal took the larva in his hand and shouted that he wasn't picky. He then popped the creature into his mouth and then shouted that it wasn't tasty. The protagonist shouted, did he eat it because he thought it was tasty? The next second, his body glowed brightly. MC thought, appearance changes depending on the character's personality, transforming him into a creature that reflects it. He hoped he wouldn't look too cruel. A puff of smoke appeared next. Baal looked at his hand and said that his appearance had changed. He blushed with embarrassment and putting his hand to his face, said that he felt strange. The system window said, Transformation Elixir, a larva that has collected the cherished desires of ancient dead giants. Whoever eats this can change their appearance once. Appearance can be changed according to the character's desires. The protagonist thought, ah, I see, this is Baal's inner self. Sergei grabbed the larva and shouted, you can't disobey the Demon King's orders. The protagonist thought she wanted to become beautiful. The next second, she appeared from behind the smoke screen, her body taking the form of an alpaca. Zephyros held out a mirror to her. She shouted, alpaca. Sergei, the cold ruler who just wanted to become a good-natured demon. The protagonist shoved the larva into Asurat's mouth and shouted, no time, he must chew. The next second he transformed into a pelican. He shouted loudly, Pelican, Asurat, the bloodsucker prince who longed for freedom after a long life as a lightning rod. The protagonist threw the larva into his mouth and thought that now it was his turn. Credos, a graduate student with questionable principles. He looked at his reflection in the mirror and thought, strange, but kind of normal. By the way, he looked at his comrades and raising his index finger up, shouted, he is just a man with dubious principles, forward, to get seeds. After that, they set off. A system window appeared in front of the protagonist, informing him that he couldn't use points while using the transformation elixir. He thought about how many restrictions there were in the game, too. If he took damage while using a skill, he would revert to his original form. So he had to be careful. They were teleporting to human territory through an abandoned well. Luckily, if they held hands, they could teleport as a group. After teleporting, he wondered, the problem was, how would they get through the gate? The worst thing was running into the elderly, aged Kimchi, if he was there too. And what would he do in human land? But quite a while had passed. If he was heading there, he was no longer here. And even if he were still here, he wouldn't recognize him. Aged Kimchi wouldn't recognize him, right? He was asking for it to work. All they could do now was get the seeds. The next second, one of the guards blew his horn, shouting that a suspicious group was approaching. His partner shouted, are these demons again? Another warrior shouted, I don't think they're demons though. Their complexions are unhealthy. Volkus approached the protagonist's group and said, they came from the village of outcasts and must return. They were unworthy of passing through these gates. Sergei thought so. Asurat thought it was a fiasco. MC looked at him and thought, totally expected. After all, there had been a demon invasion recently. Of course, they wouldn't let anyone in who didn't deserve to get inside. But he was a nerd. He was the player who had read the magazine for the 10th time, revealing all the game's secrets from cover to cover. Their glances met, and then he smiled awkwardly and said that he was just a pathetic outcast who dared to bring rare goods from the demon lands. Volkos asked, "From the demon lands?" The protagonist frowned and thought, the human king is dying of curiosity to know what's in the demon lands. He even sent a scout there, but now they have to let him through. He asked if those rare goods were what he had behind him. The protagonist replied, "Oh yes, that's right. How observant." Then he pointed at the demons and said that these beasts were caught deep in the demon lands. Their meat is simply excellent in taste. They looked at him, perplexed. Volkos asked, he said, "Rare goods from the demon lands? Aren't those a pelican and an alpaca? So he wants to present the king with such ordinary animals?" MC thought in surprise. What? In a world based on medieval Europe, alpacas and pelicans are considered ordinary animals? Volkos said that they were just the most ordinary, smelly cattle. He should take them and leave immediately. Sergei looked at him indignantly and then shouted, "Alpa!" Volkos looked at her in surprise, just like a human. "So this isn't just an alpaca?" The protagonist frowned and thought, now's his chance. He patted her head and laughing shouted, "So he noticed. Creatures living in the demon lands speak very well." Then he looked at Asura and added, "And this one also shouts very loudly. Hey, he should show. Does he hear him?" Then he plucked a couple of his feathers and he yelled, "Peli!" Volko shouted in surprise. "Wow, incredible. They have to get through." After that, they passed through the gates. The protagonist walked forward and thought, successful infiltration. Volkos turned to him and said, "Even though he has very rare animals, he is still a descendant of exiles. They can't let him wander the kingdom unsupervised. There's a special envoy in the palace right now, so they should follow him." The protagonist thought, "I'm fed up." After a while, Reborn bowed and said, "What good news." They didn't find anything special in the demon lands, so he was ashamed to show himself to the king. He's the king's special envoy, Reborn, and the man next to him is his servant, Diol. The protagonist stood in front of him and said that it was nice to meet him. His name is Jongchol from the village of exiles, and this is his friend Smelly Feet. Reborn looked up at him and asked, "So they were from the village of exiles?" They had been in that village for several months, but they had never seen him. The warriors behind them pointed their weapons at them, and he shouted for them to admit who they were. Demons? The MC thought, "Oh shit." Then Diol said, "Oh my god, their master." Raivaj has completely lost sight of faces. He must take a closer look. It's the same one who lived in the second house on the left. He asked in surprise, "Which one is on the left?" He added, "They'll just take him with them. How else could they present something to the king?" He asked him, "What if they really were demons?" He replied that it wasn't so. No way. Never. For sure. Revaj smiled and said, "Ah, right. Since they'd never spoken, he couldn't even remember. That's right. They should come this way." The protagonist frowned and thought, "That guy who looks like a potato. We can use him." Diol thought, "That sickly looking guy. He'll squeeze all the juices out of him. Once he's no longer needed, he'll get rid of him." Then Revaj said that they won't be late. They need to hit the road, and the rest should join them outside. Then he pointed at aged Kimchi and introduced him, saying that he'd volunteered to be their escort. The MC sweated. Their eyes met. He spoke, he said hello, and awkwardly introduced himself. He thought, what the hell? They all finished. After that, aged Kimchi said he seemed unwell. He should take care of himself. The protagonist asked in surprise, "Huh?" And then Revaj walked forward and said, "Well, that's it. It's a long way to the king. They need to hurry." MC put his hand to his chest and asked, didn't he recognize him? Seriously? Looks like the transformation elixir really works. At that moment, aged Kimchi turned his gaze to him. After some time, they set up camp. The protagonist, sitting by the fire, thought, dangerous, too dangerous. If a thief or bandits attack them and he gets wounded, the transformation will end, and then aged Kimchi will kill him. Enough. The kingdom's capital is too far. He just needs to sell dried potatoes and buy seeds. He has no reason to go so far with them to the capital. He noticed aged Kimchi's gaze and then awkwardly waved at him. He nodded in response. The protagonist turned around and, breathing heavily, thought, wow, all his organs failed just from his gaze. He needs to run. Tonight, that's what he's going to do. After a while, he went into Baal's tent and, slapping him in the face, yelled at him to get up. He said that in order to grow, he needs 8 hours of sleep. MC was indignant. He stopped growing 100 years ago. Idiot. After that, they left the tent. The protagonist, looking at the demons turned into animals, made a gesture for them to act nice. Then he walked forward. Sergei asked where he was going in the middle of the night. He asked if she could talk. She replied, of course she could. She just needed time to get used to her articulatory apparatus. He asked why he even stayed with those annoying idiots. They had already passed the gate, so now they were useless. They just needed to complete their goals. It will only get worse if this takes too long and they find out who they really are. At that moment, aged Kimchi appeared in front of them. He asked who they really were. MC, horrified, looked at him. Sometime later, in the abandoned lands of Chavindowantar, Hartok silently looked at the demons who approached him. He asked, what's the matter? They weren't invited, so why are they all gathered here? He replied, well, their lord is here. They heard that they need to eat their fill here. Hartok covered his face with his hand and thought, wow, the food will soon run out completely, and the king hasn't returned with the seeds. The next second, another group of demons approached. One of them shouted, what? What are those idiots from the crab army doing here? Lord Hartok, he must take them in. They have nothing to do with that idiot Planis's coup. Lizards appeared behind them. One of them shouted that he was asking to save them first. They came from far away. They're all going to die of hunger. The demons started screaming, "There's no food, he must have mercy. They're the first, they're begging." Hartok then asked how much dried potatoes they had left. Zephyros, standing nearby, replied, "A lot." But the problem was that there were even more hungry mouths, and they needed to make the food last for many days. Hartok then remembered the protagonist's words, who pointed a finger at him and said, "While he's gone, he's in charge." So he had to think and make decisions like the Demon King. He looked ahead and said, "All the demon races must divide the territory and choose a district to live in. They'll find something to eat." Meanwhile, aged Kimchi lowered his gaze and asked them to tell him who they really were. "Janchol," he answered awkwardly. "Well, he's just that." Baal came up behind him and asked why he was so embarrassed. He was smelly feet. If he gave the order, he'd finish him off. The main character turned around and told him not to interfere. "You idiot." He just had to take a closer look at aged Kimchi. "That's what real fighting power looks like." He replied, "Oh yes, he was smelly feet." Honestly, when he first saw him, he thought he was scary. And then aged Kimchi noticed he could hear everything. The MC looked at him in surprise, and he thought, the hand of fate, the Demon King Jangchul, those who condemned him to a bloody path and now want peace. What is he really trying to achieve? And why has he gone so far? He wants to know what he's really planning. After that, the protagonist said that in fact, they weren't bringing gifts to the king. As he knew, they lived on barren lands. But they still had to somehow farm, and behind them, in the cart, lay their local produce. They had come here to sell dried potatoes and buy vegetable seeds. So, fearing the truth would be revealed, they decided to secretly elope, and it was a long way to the king. They should have gone to the nearest town. He apologized. He should understand that they were so poor that they didn't even have anything to eat. He held out his hand and thought, he's trying to play on their pity. They definitely won't go any further. Then their gazes met again. Aged Kimchi thought, look, there's something hidden in it. But it's definitely not a lie. The demons began devouring people because they had nothing to eat. Then he said he understood, but he couldn't let them escape. Young Master Azrahan allowed them to pass so they could present gifts to the king. He couldn't cause him any more trouble. They needed to do this. Along the way, they'd sell dried potatoes and buy seeds, but they'd reach the kingdom's capital and present their animals to the king, as they'd promised. He replied, "Of course, those animals, they're littered with them." His comrades thought, he's serious right now. He can't be serious, can he? MC smiled and thought they'd just buy the seeds and run off, their heels flashing. As morning approached, they continued on their way. Revaj approached the protagonist and said, "They mentioned selling dried potatoes along the way. Could he show me what they were?" The protagonist looked at him and replied, "Oh yes, it's a simple food, simply made from a large potato." He then lifted the cart's cover and revealing the potatoes, said, "Here." Revaj smiled and wished them good sales. Dial, standing nearby, shouted indignantly, "Sir." He pointed at the protagonist and told him to present this to the king as a gift. "It's worth much more." The protagonist looked at him in surprise and then asked, "It's just a big, ugly potato. How could he?" He shouted, "It's not just big, it's incredibly huge." The MC said, "Oh, how funny he is. If bigger was better, then the tallest man should be king?" Raivaj smiled and said he thought he liked the potatoes so much because it was like him. He gritted his teeth and wondered if he would really save up enough money to make him a slave. After that, they continued on their way. The protagonist, watching them from behind, thought, as the potato head had said, he could present the potato to the king and receive a reward. After all, it really was an unusual potato. However, it was much more important to get rid of aged Kimchi, and as quickly as possible before he revealed who they really were. After a few seconds, Raivaj looked ahead and told them to look there. It was the trading city of Dafarichia. Out of the kindness of Azrakan's heart, he and Baal stayed in one room. Aged Kimchi and his companions stayed in another. Of course, there was no room for the animals. What kind of trading city was this if the inn had so many empty rooms? And it was so squalid too. Oh well, that was their first goal. Selling potatoes was their first priority. Sometime later, they were walking down the street. Asura, looking at the protagonist, asked if he really intended to present a pelican to the human king. He replied, "Of course not, idiot. Who would he give his precious lightning rod to?" He asked if he hadn't stopped being a lightning rod. He replied that he was on vacation, so he should rest. Sergei looked ahead and said something was strange here. She had heard that such cities were bustling with life, but here it was even more deserted than the demon lands. The protagonist looked at the merchant and thought, this city had been suspicious from the start. They say the economy is in trouble here. Will he sell potatoes here? No. Why worry ahead of time? Problems must be solved as they arise. After that, he laid the potatoes on the cloth and shouted, "Potatoes the size of heads. 1 for 20, 2 for 30. They should come and choose. Sister, auntie, brother, uncle. They have to come and choose. Come and buy. Delicious, nutritious, huge potatoes. They have to buy potatoes." Baal looked at him, blushing with embarrassment, and said that he was so embarrassed. This was their demon king. In response, he yelled at him to shut up. What's so embarrassing about them trying to make a living? After all, demons were cannibals to avoid starvation. They'll be lucky if it ends in such shame. After that, they all started shouting at the villagers to come and dig. After that, MC looked at the demons transformed into animals and shouted, "Why are they standing?" After that, everyone got to work. The protagonist thought, if someone from the modern world ends up in a fantasy world and starts selling something, they could start selling ice cream or food with a bunch of flavorings, and then they'll get rich in an instant. But in the end, it's just giant potatoes. It's unlikely that anything more than simple curiosity from customers about an unfamiliar product will be expected. Therefore, they must do everything possible to sell the potatoes. To make a living. That's how it works. After some time, a man approached them and asked if it really only costs 20 gold. MC, looking at him, happily thought, here's his first customer. He replied, of course, if he buys 2. He looked ahead in surprise. A huge crowd of villagers had begun to crowd around them. They shouted, then he needs 4. He needs both. And he needs 6, no 10. The protagonist, perplexed, thought, what the hell is this? Did advertising work like that so well? Then the protagonist looked at Asura sitting on him and shouted, why is he stopping? He needs to sell faster, Pelican. Sergei shouted, yes. This time everything worked as their king intended. The protagonist confirmed this and then shouted for everyone to get in line. One by one, one by one. After a while, he looked at the bag of money in his hands and thought, they sold 1/3 of the potatoes in an instant. And if all the news spreads, then tomorrow they will all be sold out. After that, he shouted, 4 generals, they must go to their stall. He will go buy seeds. They all shouted joyfully, a bumper harvest. After some time, the protagonist approached the merchant. He was sitting behind the counter and asked, he wants seeds. He is joking, right? MC asked in surprise. What? He replied that there are no seeds in this city. The protagonist frowned and thought, what? After that, he asked, he won't be able to buy seeds here. The merchant replied that most of the food products or seeds are sold in large trading companies. He asked, and where is that? The man extended his hand forward and asked, he should listen. What's with his complexion? MC shouted that he was born like this. So where are these companies? He asked, Well, he should ask that man. At that moment, Ruslan approached him and apologized. Wasn't he the one who sold potatoes by the fountain earlier? The protagonist confirmed this. The man put his hand to his chest and said that his name was Ruslan. He was Mr. Richmond's assistant, and he oversaw all of the Richmond Company's operations. The protagonist said, wow, I see. And why did they need him? He wondered if the Richmond Company was just one of those big companies. After that, Ruslan raised 2 fingers and suggested getting straight to the point. 20%. He would buy all the potatoes and add that much to their price. The protagonist thought in surprise, what? He knew it. Then he said, well, before that, he wants to ask something. How much does a handful of cabbage seeds cost? He replied that if it was a handful, in the current situation, their company would sell it for 100 gold pieces. The protagonist thought that's a huge markup. By local standards, the seeds should cost 5 to 10 gold pieces at most, and he was asking for twice that. Those guys from Richmond are profiteers. They've monopolized all distribution channels and are creating artificial shortages. It's pure robbery. A dilapidated guest house that's doing absolutely nothing. A dying market. People who are trying to survive by buying dried potatoes. It's all they're doing. And that means, he smiled slyly, and Ruslan looked at him in surprise and wondered, what's he making that face about? Then MC thought, even if he sold all the potatoes, he'd never be able to buy the seeds at the price he was asking. But he's under no obligation to buy. Well, more accurately, he is, but he's a demon, so he doesn't obey the law. Then he looked to the side and thought, aged Kimchi is watching his every move. He must have sensed something suspicious. However, he'd figured out how to fool him and get the seeds. Then he looked at Ruslan and asked, he wants to buy the dried potatoes, right? He confirmed this if he signed a contract with them now. After that, the protagonist told him to call the boss. Ruslan said indignantly, but he's responsible for the company's operations. The protagonist looked at him arrogantly and said, but he's just an employee? Does he really have the authority to make this decision? He thought he should look into this first. He's not some small trader who can be easily manipulated. Ruslan continued to be indignant. He's the second most important person in the company. He has practically every authority. After that, he replied, okay then. Then he's asking for 200 gold for 1 potato. Well, does he agree? Ruslan looked at him in bewilderment and then shouted, but 200 is a bit much. The protagonist extended his hand and said, but he's a small fry. He can't make the decision himself. Has his boss thought it all through? These dried potatoes are huge. They're very nutritious and easy to bury. If they were supplied to the royal army, for example, the profit would be incredible. Well, that's the problem. How can he sell the potatoes at a loss? Perhaps we should negotiate with the ruler first. He thinks it's worth it. Isn't that right? The other man looked at him with irritation, and then MC pointed a finger at him and said, well, in short, he should call the boss. After a while, it started to rain. Asura, soaking wet, shouted that he would never forgive him. The demon king, Sergei, who was sitting next to him, looked at him and told him not to yell. Hadn't he heard what the king said? They shouldn't show that they can talk and attract attention. He looked at her and asked, since when has she been so obedient? Doesn't she care that she was dragged to the lands of humans? She looked ahead and asked, what if she was interested? He looked surprised. Why? She said she was curious. She had wanted to know what this place was like since childhood. She had been told that they had plenty of food and that they didn't eat each other, but she couldn't even imagine what it was like. Did he know that her parents were eaten by a more powerful demon, and she wasn't even sad? It was so familiar to her. He must have felt the same way when his younger siblings were eaten, right? He looked down, and she added, "This city was poorer than they thought, but they still don't devour each other." Then, last time at the market, the boy's father also looked hungry, but first he fed his son some potatoes. If they had been born here, surely they would be happy too? Asura looked at her saddened face and said that she looked different when she spoke of highly emotional things. She said that she didn't usually talk about such things. After that, he covered her with his wing and said that now good times would come for demons too. At that moment, the protagonist ran up to them and, pointing a finger, shouted, "These two." Asura embarrassedly shouted that he had misunderstood everything. She was simply being impudent. She also blushed with embarrassment and screamed, "He's bothering her. He must kill him." After that, the protagonist took them in his arms and shouted for them to come inside. An emergency meeting of the 4 generals. After some time, they all entered the house. Asura asked in surprise, "What? They're buying up all the food and selling it at a high price?" Sergi asked why they were doing this. Pelican added, "But isn't there already plenty of food here?" MC said it's not that they're afraid of hunger. They just want to earn more and get rich. Val said that he knows, when all basic needs are met, demands grow, or people strive for recognition. The protagonist asked, why is he being clever here? Asurat said that it's the most common greed, even when there is plenty of food. Sergi spoke up, and some still have nothing to eat. Val said that for some reason he's angry. Then the protagonist raised his hand and said, respected generals, they may not like something, but that's the way people are. They just need to control themselves for the sake of their main goal. And they, the demons, as demons usually do, will seize their warehouse. After some time, an air current spread among the mountains and everyone watched it closely. Someone asked what Mr. Hartok was doing. He was writhing and screaming loudly, and someone said that he suddenly told him to make a huge cauldron, had been summoning a tornado like this for a long time. Hartok screamed loudly and then fell to his knees and began to breathe heavily. He thought his strength was starting to fade. He frowned and shouted in irritation. What were they looking at? Is now the time to rest? Zephyros said, Mr. Hartok, he thinks he's taken on too much. And why does he need so much water? Hartok replied that he knows himself. So many demons have gathered here that they cannot be counted. They will not be able to feed them all with dried potatoes, so he is going to boil the potatoes in water. He thought for a moment and realized that, with the same amount of food, he can feed more demons. After all, there should be no hungry demons in these abandoned lands. Zephyros looked at him carefully and thought, he seems to be doing good deeds, so why does he have an expression like he is about to kill someone? Maybe since he is a demon, he can't do otherwise? Everything began to change here, ever since the Demon King announced that they would be engaged in agriculture. The cruel and cold-blooded Hartok began to do everything possible to get food for the other demons. What made Hartok change so drastically? Hartok laughed and thought, he will hear a lot of praise for this, right? Zephyros said, but Mr. Hartok, to heat such a large cauldron, a lot of firewood will be needed. Hartok replied, well, of course, it will be impossible to do unless they defeat the lower-level demons. So now they are heading to the 3rd star zone, the sealed volcano, and there they will catch the fire predator. After some time, the merchant Richmond was walking down the city street. He stopped and said, this place. Ruslan, this time he was disappointed in him. How could he be afraid of the tales of some uneducated country bumpkin? Is he fit for big business if he's so stupid? Let him wait for him here. Ruslan frowned in irritation and looked down. Richmond walked up to the door and ordered Ruslan to watch and learn how to take everything they had from the ignoramuses. MC asked who was there. Richmond replied, an ordinary merchant of this town, Richmond. He wanted to see him in person, so he came. Kredos replied, oh my god, let him come in, Richmond said. Then he begs him to excuse him. He frowned and thought, these ignoramuses are completely relaxed in front of the mask of feigned politeness, and they have no idea that kindness is just a mask. He saw MC in front of him, who was sitting surrounded by his subordinates. Richmond thought fearfully, Mom, how scary. Kratos asked, won't he sit down? Richmond sat down on the chair in front of him and said, all right, he thought. Why do they create such an impression, as if they were some kind of demons? Why are they even in this room? They are animals, right? But why do they have such human expressions on their faces? And who is this huge, handsome man drooling over? With a face like that, he looks even scarier. MC said, well, so he heard his offer? Richmond said fearfully, well, he asked for 200 gold pieces for the potatoes. Kredos asked again, really? Isn't it 300? Richmond's eyes widened in surprise and he screamed, but 300 is too much. Kredos said, young Master Azrakhan is with them. Richmond said, if he is from the Azrakhan clan. MC extended his hand and said, they are a noble family that receives orders directly from the royal family. Isn't now the best time to demonstrate it? MC laughed out loud, and Richmond went outside and said that they agreed on 300 gold pieces. Ruslan's eyes widened in confusion, and Richmond said, and they should move it to the mansion, and separate rooms must be prepared even for animals. Ruslan asked, but why? Richmond answered, because it was stipulated in the contract. Ruslan cried out, Mr. Richmond, why did he treat these ignoramuses so generously? Richmond shouted in irritation, you idiot. His losses are always repaid in greater volume. He really knows nothing. He turned around and began to leave, and Ruslan looked after him in irritation. Richmond thought for a moment. In fact, he was very scared. Bao folded his arms across his chest and said that he did not understand anything. It would be easier to kill them and take the seeds. MC replied. That was indeed his style. What if a battle had started and their reincarnation was cancelled by the damage received? Then it could have escalated into a war between humans and demons. They need to avoid fights, so the most effective option is to steal everything and run away. First, he ordered them to listen to the plan. This idiot needs 3 things to make money: a cover to protect him from the law, a huge amount of capital, and a warehouse where he can store mountains of food. First, they will infiltrate the mansion and find out where the warehouse is. Sergei said, but my lord, how does he know human psychology so well? It's as if he's been living in the human world for a long time. Kratos looked at her carefully and then replied, he's a king, so he's omniscient. He used a cheat code, and fools are easily convinced. The demons thought as expected from the Demon King. Aged Kimchi stood near the door, wondering if the hand of fate had decided to rob a man. No, this is the Demon King, Kratos. After a while, Ravaj's voice was heard in the Richmond mansion. He asked, Lord Kim Jangchol, how did he manage to get such luxurious rooms? What did he promise them? MC waved his hand and said, it's nothing. He sold them a magnificent chunyo, and this is just their gratitude for the honor. Ravaj said, who would have thought that this big potato was so valuable? Dial let out a loud scream. This isn't just big, it's a whale among potatoes. After all, they were taking this to the king. Ravaj sighed and said, it seemed to him that it wasn't the size that appealed to him, but their resemblance. They were almost kindred spirits. Dial cried out, how did he think they were similar? Ravaj answered, well, in their facial features? Dial asked fearfully, he didn't sell it all, right? MC answered, everything, down to the last peel. However, it will be theirs again if they steal it. Dial said with anticipation, he's in. Ravaj grabbed his face and asked, will they steal it? What is he up to? Kratos asked, what's wrong with that? They'll just carry out everything they took, every last bit. Ravaj screamed, he's an honorable man. He can't condone such outrage. MC replied, yes, they know, he can't. Then he'll probably let them continue buying up all the food in the city, let them bury the economy. Ravaj's eyes widened and he asked in surprise, what is he talking about? After a while, Ruslan was standing on the street, keeping an eye on the cart. Suddenly, a shout came from behind him. Oh my god, if only everyone had workers like that. He's already sending their goods to the warehouse? Ruslan frowned incredulously and replied, exactly. He thought about how infuriating his face was. MC asked, does he want to see it too? Can he have a tour? He wanted to see for himself that their chunyo was being handled properly. Ruslan replied, he won't allow it. Kratos interrupted him and asked, why is that? Ruslan replied, their warehouse is a secret place. MC interrupted him again and asked, how can it be a secret? Ruslan replied, it's the greatest secret for preserving the freshness of food. MC shouted, don't be so stubborn, he won't ruin it. Ruslan screamed, have he completely lost his mind? Kratos fell to the ground and began kicking and punching the ground, shouting loudly, well, let him show me the warehouse. Ruslan replied, insolence must have limits, that won't get him. He looked at the guy and asked irritably, why is he frozen? Let him go. The guy turned around and replied, of course. MC ran across the ground and fell in front of the cart. He screamed, he won't move, over his dead body, or let them take him to the warehouse. The guy tried to lift MC and screamed, let him get out now. Kratos replied, he has nowhere else to go. This is his home now. Warehouse, let him take him to the warehouse. Bal looked at what was happening from the window and asked, is the Lord moaning? Sergei said she was officially resigning. This is such a disgrace. MC continued lying on the ground and shouting something about a warehouse and potatoes. Ravaj put his hand to his face and thought, his behavior is so embarrassing, what is he doing? Dial called him a legend, and Ravaj turned at his voice. Dial said this willingness to abandon human dignity for the sake of a goal, he will remember the technique and use it in the next life. Ravaj asked, what next life? No one can wash away this. MC did not calm down, and Ravaj thought, he was so self-confident. Some time ago, Kratos said, yes, they probably should expose their crimes and punish them according to the law, but collecting evidence, finding their protection, filing a lawsuit in the royal court, how long will it take? And the unfortunate townspeople. He bursted in tears and said, they will also starve. He will not put up with this. Ravaj grabbed his face, and tears welled up in his eyes. Kratos spoke up, believing that he too cares for the fate of the population, and will not abandon them alone on the path to justice. They will return what these villains took, what rightfully belongs to the people. MC continued shouting, warehouse. Ravaj paused, now fully grasping the depth of his thoughts. He too must work hard. He recalled MC's words, that he would find out the location, and they must prepare everything necessary. Ravaj thought his method was a bit peculiar. The knights rocked MC and eventually threw him aside. The guy screamed, what a tumbler! They need to move and not slow down. MC looked after them and shouted, analysis completed. The system window reported that Ruslan would be irritated for the next 7 hours. He headed north from his current position toward a secret warehouse under an abandoned mine on the outskirts of the domain. Aged Kimchi watched him from the window and thought that if he wanted, He could take everything by force. It would be much easier that way. And yet, is this robbery or an attempt to restore justice? Is he a demon or a hero? The longer he watches, the harder it is for him. After a while, Hartok walked through the dungeon, followed by Zephyros. He said, "General Hartok, the Fire Eater is incredibly strong. Maybe they shouldn't have gone alone?" Hartok answered. He answered his own question. A bunch of weaklings would have become cannon fodder and protect the people and overcome any fear themselves. He grabbed the metal bars and pulled them apart. He said, "This is work for the 4 heavenly kings." Zephyros and T-Bong were terrified of what was happening. Hartok turned around and asked, "Did he write down what he just said?" Zephyros grabbed a pencil and answered, "Yes." Hartok smugly thought, "Cool. The Overlord will definitely appreciate this. Hartok, he's a genius with a heart of gold." He thought, devourer, low intellect, and extreme aggression. He was going to execute him for illegal cannibalism, but he had to lock him up. He could be useful in the future. He stopped and looked at the flowing lava. Hartok ordered them to leave. They had work to do. Ikrit, the Fire Eater. The lava began to splash and rise. A huge dragon appeared in front of Hartok, which greatly surprised Hartok. He wondered when it had grown so big. At that moment, Zephyros was petting T-Bong's belly. He squealed very happily when suddenly Hartok ran out from behind the bars and yelled, "Let them run if they value their lives." Rocks began to fly in all directions, and Ikrit burst out of the cave. He began to spread his fiery breath everywhere. Zephyros grabbed T-Bong and asked, "General Hartok, why is he running away like such a coward?" Hartok turned and ordered him to shut up. "This fiend of hell has become too strong after eating fire." Zephyros took out his notebook and said, "General Hartok assured everyone that he was an excellent leader, but now he's running with his tail between his legs." Hartok ordered them to drop their notes. "Horned One, they are retreating right now. They will think about how to start a fire later." He crouched down and placed his hand on the ground, thinking, "There's no time." Hartok activated the mana in his hand and shouted, "He is Hartok, one of the 4 demonic generals, and he will fulfill his duty at the cost of his life." T-Bong spat out saliva, and it landed on Ikrit's cheek, and his body became covered in ice. Hartok looked at this carefully and sank down. Zephyros said, "General Hartok, one of the 4 demonic generals, he looks rather embarrassed." Hartok turned around and ordered them not to dare write this down. At that moment, MC said, "Afterwards, the 3 of them are waiting for his signal. He will check the warehouse." Revaj asked to leave this with him. Kratos said, "For the sake of human food." Revaj said, "Mr. Kim Jang-chul seems like a nice guy, but his face." MC asked again, "What's wrong with his face?" Revaj replied, "Well, nothing. But why is he hiding everything from aged Kimchi?" Kratos replied, "He attracts too much attention. The 2 of them are more than enough." Revaj turned and looked at everyone in the room. He said he understood. He thought he'd better keep his mouth shut, otherwise anything could happen. MC ran across the rooftops and thought, "The plan is to steal the seeds and not endanger Kimchi, so it will be easier without him. Thank the devil, he doesn't ask unnecessary questions." Okay, it's time for him to finish his reconnaissance. After a while, he approached the cave where the knights were standing. He climbed inside and thought, the security is heavy. One wrong step and he can't avoid the battle. The elixir's biggest vulnerability is taking damage, after which the effect wears off. If aged Kimchi finds out everything, it's all over. So, where is their food warehouse? At that moment, aged Kimchi appeared behind him. MC turned around and looked at him in fear. He grabbed his heart and shook. Aged Kimchi asked why he was so scared. His face looked even scarier now than it had been. He was going to share food with the townspeople, right? He would help. MC asked how he knew. Aged Kimchi replied, he had excellent hearing. Even being on another floor, he could understand what he was saying. Krito's eyes widened in surprise and his mouth fell open. He thought, wait, so he heard his conversations with the 4 generals too? They called him the Demon Lord, right? Or not? Or yes? Aged Kimchi narrowed his eyes and asked, did it even matter? They didn't need to hurry? MC answered, exactly, yes. He smiled and thought, it's true. If he had heard everything, he would have been completely obliterated. So he didn't know. He just couldn't hear. He crawled forward and told him to just follow him. They needed to approve the route. Aged Kimchi asked, why were they sneaking? MC asked again, what do you mean? Aged Kimchi asked, wouldn't it be easier to kill them all? That's what he was taught. Kritos turned around in surprise and remembered how Aged Kimchi dealt with the man. He waved his hand and said, yes, but life is a wonderful creation. If it's possible to resolve the issue without fighting, that would be much better. Aged Kimchi nodded his head and replied, I understand, if those are his ideals. After a while they peeked out from around the corner, and MC thought, strange, why do the guards become fewer as they go deeper? He saw golems and wondered in surprise. Is this the golem he'd seen in gaming magazines? It was a weapon developed in one of the magic towers. In the game, they were all destroyed, so it was impossible to encounter them, and he was curious about how strong they were. At that moment, while MC was pondering, Aged Kimchi ran forward and attacked the golems. Kritos ran up to him and irritably asked, why did he just destroy them? He was just ranting about a peaceful solution. Aged Kimchi asked, they're not even alive, so what's wrong? This path is much. What was that again? It's like some voice is haunting him. He keeps hearing it. This path solves their problems much easier. MC frowned and then laughed and thought he was right. The golems were walking along the perimeter of the mine. MC said there were 3 in this sector. If they catch them and raise the alarm, the plan will be ruined. So, Aged Kimchi said they will track their route 10 times to be sure. As soon as a blind spot appears, they take them out one by one, starting from the far one. Does he agree? MC looked at him and asked, right? He thought, did he learn this? Is it really just reflexes, the way he played them? Aged Kimchi said, but he doesn't see any flaws in their defense. They will have to take on the ones closest at once. We need to divide and conquer. In their case, we need to finish them off. MC asked, can he handle it? Such a weakling, even a golem with one hand? He thought his body was too unreliable against these boulders. Aged Kimchi exhaled, then took an item out of his pocket and said to take this. With this, he would immediately feel a surge of strength. Kratos looked at it carefully and thought, this is one of the top secrets. This is Bragius's cute heart-shaped hammer. At first it looked like a terrible joke, but the more he looked at it, the more he was convinced that it was imbalanced. It gives a 30% boost to stats, even just by holding it. So they will struggle some more. Aged Kimchi reached into the inside pocket of his cloak again and pulled out a huge sword. He said, and this is his thing. MC thought, so he really does have everything in the game's inventory? Doraemon, is it? This is some kind of magic. Aged Kimchi said, well, it's time. MC said, no, they will wait a little longer. Aged Kimchi rushed forward and shouted, now. Kratos climbed out from behind the cart and thought, holy shit, where did he run off to, you idiot? He won't even have time to hit. Suddenly, Aged Kimchi stopped in front of the huge golem and turned around. MC thought, what is he waiting? He swung his item and struck the golem. He thought, they've broken the whole system, now it'll turn around. His mother told him, right, you don't need to stand under the arrow. MC rushed into battle and did a somersault, and Aged Kimchi copied him. They attacked the golem and threw their heads to the side. Kratos thought, this idiot is good. How did he manage to synchronize them so perfectly? At that moment, the knights were walking next to the tracks and asking, there were 3 boulders right there. Where are they going? At that moment, guys appeared behind them and hit the knights in the neck. They acted very synchronized, as if they had been practicing before. They threw the knights into the minecart, and MC thought, what kind of idiots are these? He and Aged Kimchi are just made for each other. They attacked the golems together, and Kratos thought, but he's having a lot of fun with this really scary monster. Aged Kimchi smiled and thought, he taught me how to kill, but he tells me not to. He tried to destroy humanity and now he longs for peace. A mysterious stranger from another dimension who sows discord in his heart. But now it's just great to spend time with him. But if he starts asking questions, will he be honest? The knight foamed at the mouth and MC screamed, he's going to die like this. Take it easy. There aren't many villains who truly deserve death. These people are just hostages to circumstance. They have their own scars on their hearts, and he doesn't want to be the cause of new suffering. Aged Kimchi looked at him carefully and then walked forward, and they had made good progress. Only there were no guards or golems in sight. Kratos spoke. Apparently they hoped that the crazy people who wandered in here wouldn't be found. Aged Kimchi put his finger to his face, asking for a quieter voice. MC saw a door ahead and said, well, that's huge. Aged Kimchi said, the golems are no smaller. Kratos smiled and said, it just screams. It's a warehouse, and now it's time for them to go get their goods. Aged Kimchi held his hand out in front of him and said, someone's coming. Footsteps were heard and they saw Richmond. The golem looked down and asked, who's here? It's not allowed. It gives 3 seconds to escape, and then he'll have only himself to blame. Richmond raised his hand and showed the ring to the golem, who said that Mr. Richmond's blood had been confirmed. Welcome. The doors to the warehouse opened and MC thought, is the security system blood-based? So that's the end of the story. After a while they got inside and Kratos looked around in surprise. This warehouse is packed to the brim. Bread, vegetables, seeds, and what else? He said, the plans have changed. Since these idiots have gathered in one place, let him give them a good chop. Aged Kimchi responded as quickly as he could. He swung his sword and cut the golem down, and MC ran up to Richmond and grabbed him by the shoulder. Richmond turned around and asked, who else is there? MC slapped him in the face and Aged Kimchi watched closely. He remembered Kratos' words. They had their own scars on their hearts. He didn't want to be the cause of more suffering. Aged Kimchi wondered if he was just sick. After a while, Richmond came to his senses and asked, what the hell is this? MC approached his face, which greatly frightened Richmond. Kratos asked with displeasure, don't you recognize the place? He was in the torture chamber he built himself. Why would an ordinary merchant need such a room? Richmond screamed in fear. What the hell? This was a training room. MC said, it's like calling dirt mashed potatoes. He grabbed Richmond's face and opened his eyes wide. Richmond thought fearfully, Mom, he's so scared. It looked like a murderer crying before lynching his victim. The system window reported that Richmond planned to capture him, Kim Jang-chul, intimidate him, and steal the source of the giant potatoes. MC smiled and said, thank you. It dispelled all his doubts. Richmond thought fearfully. First he cries, then laughs and says, thank you. He doesn't even understand what he's talking about, and this idiot doesn't even look grateful. It's impossible to expect anything from this idiot. He's a demon, a monster. Kratos told Aged Kimchi not to go anywhere. He will watch the unfolding masterpiece from the front row. Richmond lowered his head and said, stupid country bumpkin, don't underestimate his security system. A huge golem entered the room and Richmond shouted, A-class defense, destroyer golem, let him smear them all over the ground. The golem swung its fist and MC showed him a napkin with blood. It reported, it confirms the blood of Lord Richmond. Aged Kimchi jumped up and attacked the monster. Richmond thought, a crazy demon paired with a swordsman who cuts his golems in half. What are they going to do with him? After a while, Credos and Aged Kimchi were running along the rooftops of buildings, holding groceries in their hands. Aged Kimchi asked, even though they locked Richmond down, security will be tightened, right? MC replied, let them do whatever they want. It will be no use against a huge crowd anyway. Aged Kimchi looked at him, and MC thought this applies to him too. Aged Kimchi. After a while, Bale shouted, a sale is starting at the Richmond Guild warehouse. The Richmond Guild has gone bankrupt. Diol banged on a pot and shouted, let them take whatever they can carry. It's their property now. The warehouse is open. They can come in boldly. A townsman asked, is this not a joke? Can he just come in and take what he wants? The man replied, they have nothing to lose, so they can try. MC stood on the roof and loudly ordered everyone to listen. They can carry out as much of anything as they want. Go ahead. The townspeople joyfully clenched their fists and shouted, they're coming. They'll give back everything those idiots took from them. After a while, the knights saw a huge crowd of townspeople with torches and asked, what the hell? The townspeople are approaching. They're gonna break through them. The knight pointed his spear in their direction and shouted, stop. This is private property. The townspeople shouted, they're lying. They're bankrupt. Let them get out of the way. Golems, don't let them pass. The man grabbed his head and said, horror. He knew it. The guy spoke exactly. Even if it dies, it will take everything with it to the next world. Neither itself nor the people. MC took out a handkerchief and asked, didn't Mr. Richmond give them permission to loot the warehouse? The golem shouted, he confirms Mr. Richmond's blood, successfully. The townspeople rushed forward and joyfully struck the knight. MC ran after him, telling Aged Kimchi to go forward and remove every obstacle in his path. Aged Kimchi replied, understood. He pushed off the ground and rushed forward, and MC thought, how obedient he is. What a naive idiot. He turned around and shouted, as soon as they reach the warehouse, they need to immediately run for the seeds, and then they retreat. Everything is exactly according to plan. A moment later, the townspeople were snatching up food from the warehouse, and MC was throwing bags into the cart and shouting, hurry up, let them move. Suddenly, Ruslan ran into the room and shouted, Mr. Richmond, he screamed. Ruslan, let him untie him. Right now, Ruslan said. That merchant brought the townspeople with him, and now they are carrying everything out of the warehouse. Richmond screamed, oh my god, Ruslan said. They need to activate Ellen's golems. Richmond got angry and yelled, idiot. He wants to make money, not shed rivers of blood. Ruslan lowered his head, then looked at him with irritated eyes and asked, he's already sucked all the money out of the townspeople, so how is this any different from bloodshed? He thinks he'll follow him after he's lost everything and gone bankrupt? Richmond frowned in irritation, while the townspeople were running away and shouting loudly, food, they're not sleeping, no more starvation. Suddenly, golems appeared in front of them and said they couldn't allow theft. The guy asked in fear, what, is that thing broken? At that moment, Aged Kimchi swung his sword and attacked the monster. MC thought, Aged Kimchi is probably too busy protecting the fleeing townspeople, and the two ran away when he mentioned humans, so none of them are his problem anymore. If he can escape now, he'll hit the jackpot. Credos turned around and shouted, guys, they're running. Suddenly, the ceiling began to crack, and MC thought in fear, what, the ceiling? A huge boulder fell down, straight at the people, who began to scatter in fear in different directions. MC screamed, 4 demonic generals, let them hold it. A girl sat on the ground, clutching her daughter. She was crying and shaking, accepting her fate. Suddenly, she opened her eyes and saw the demons holding the boulder. Ruslan looked down and said, vile, vile thieves. He will kill every last one and return all the riches.